committee meeting that we'll plan to go into tomorrow. If you are not speaking, this is for the panel members. Please ensure that you keep your microphones muted so that way we can avoid any audio collisions, echoing, or reverb that may begin to happen. For members of the public, when it comes time for public comment, we will display on your screen for reference the means in which you will be requesting to make public comment. We will ask that you submit your request to make public comment and follow the instructions displayed very carefully. We will not be taking any other items that are submitted for public comment if it does not follow those directions. Also, members of the public, we will not be utilizing the hand raise feature, so please try to avoid using the hand raise function. Members of the panel committee members, we will be utilizing the hand raise feature. If you would like to say something, please feel free to raise your hand and you will be called on by Committee Chair Farrow or myself, the moderator, in order to avoid individuals talking over each other. With that, we are set to begin, and I turn it over to Committee Chair, Mr. Farrow.
Good morning. And moderator, please feel free to identify people who have raised their hands. So that way we don't talk over one another. So, good morning. I'm happy to be back together to talk about this merger of the three licensing agencies into one and our preparation for that. And with that, can I call to order the meeting? Can I get a roll call, please?
I'm taking roll now, starting with Baboulian.
Here.
Cermak. Moderator can ask if committee member Cermak can be unmuted. Committee member Cermak.
This is the moderator. Dr. Cermak, I have unmuted you manually.
Yes, I am here. Thank you.
Thank you. Clifford.
I'm here.
Thank you. Farrow.
Present.
Thank you. Heidelback.
I'm here.
Thank you. Harada.
Here.
Thank you. Lynch.
Here.
Thank you. Nevdal.
Here.
Thank you. Peck.
Here.
Thank you. Stevenson.
Here.
Thank you. Todd.
Here.
Thank you. Williams.
Here.
Thank you. Woolsey.
Here.
Thank you. Wu.
Here.
And you.
Here.
Thank you. Quorum is established.
Sorry about that. I didn't unmute myself. I said the next item agenda is a review of our minutes from our meetings last month. We have 2 days of minutes. Committee members, you should have received those and had an opportunity to review those. If you should have any modification you would like to have, please bring those to our attention. If not, I'd like to have someone make a recommendation to accept the minutes as written.
This is the moderator. Committee member Nevdal does have her hand raised.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we accept both days of August meeting minutes.
Do we have a second?
This is Avis, I'll second.
With that, I'd like to open it up to public comment. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make comments on the minutes for the meetings of last month?
This is the moderator. The Q&A panel has been open and displayed momentarily on the screen will be your reference. Please click on the Q&A icon located on the bottom of your screen and submit "I would like to make a public comment" and send to all panelists. I will take all requests in the order they are received. At this time, Mr. Chair, we have not received any requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Excuse me. Yes, please close the comment section.
Thank you.
And then I'd like to take the roll.
Pavilion, Pavilion, what is your vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Cermak,
Moderator, please unmute Dr. Cermak's mic, please.
He is currently unmuted.
I have a difficulty. I was never able to find my hand to raise in order to suggest something to an addition to the minutes. So I don't know if that's appropriate now or not appropriate now. I am very sorry for the inconvenience.
That would be appropriate. So if the people who made the motions would be willing to withdraw that motion for the moment, so we can allow Dr. Cermak to raise his issue.
I'm fine with that. Do we need to withdraw the motion, just hold the vote or discussion?
This is the moderator. Can I interject just one moment? I would like to remind all committee members that before you speak, if you could please identify who you are for the court reporter who's capturing what's being stated today.
Yes, my apologies. That's member Nadal asking for clarification about whether the motion needed to be pulled or the vote could be held for comment on the motion or discussion of the motion.
We could hold, am I muted or not?
You are not muted.
Sorry. We could hold the vote and then entertain another motion by Dr. Cermak for a modification. We would open it back up to public comment if it got a second, and then re-vote again. Or we could get a withdrawal of the motion between the first and the second, and then entertain the comment from committee member Cermak, again, open it up to public comment. So we can take the vote if that is your preference.
This is member Nevedal. That was not what I'm suggesting, but in the same time, I will withdraw the motion.
Mr. Babulian, will you withdraw your second?
Davis, yes.
Okay, so we don't have a motion to consider at this moment. Dr. Cermak, would you like to discuss the modifications that you'd like to raise?
Thank you very much. I'm really deeply embarrassed by how the difficulty that I put in front of everyone by my inability sometimes visually. It's just a brief comment that I thought should have been left into the minutes. It was on page 6 of the second day, following the very close vote on the flavoring issue. And it's following that vote, there was a member of the committee, I believe it was Chairman Farrow, you can correct me if I'm wrong, saying that had the vote been, or had the motion been altered, that he considered changing his vote. And I thought that should have been reflected in the minutes. Thank you very much.
That is accurate, and if the committee would like to add that to the minutes, I'm happy to allow them to add that to the minutes. Would legal counsel like to comment if that's appropriate?
We'd have to confirm on the transcript to make sure that was accurate, but that is something that the Bureau could look into. I apologize. This was Angela McIntyre, counsel for the Bureau. There seems to have been feedback. The Bureau would have to go back and look at the transcript to confirm that this was the case, but this is something that we could look into in revising the meeting minutes.
Okay, can you hear me now? So this is committee member Farrow, Chairman Farrow. I do recall, so what I would suggest is that we accept the minutes as written with the opportunity for staff to make the modification to include my comments that if there was another motion, basically how that motion spelled out, I could have supported it. So with that, is there somebody willing to make that as a motion?
This is Member Cermak. I so move.
Can I get a second?
This is Member Heidelbach. I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Can I open it up to public comment?
This is your moderator. I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your screen and submit "I would like to make a public comment." We are making public comment on agenda item number 2, which is review and approval of the August meeting minutes. I will pause a moment to allow individuals time to access this feature. Mr. Chairman, no requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please close the Q&A and can we take the roll?
Waboulian,
Aye.
Cermak,
Aye.
Clifford,
Aye.
Farrow,
Aye.
Heidelbach,
Aye.
Harada,
Aye.
Lynch,
Aye.
Nevdahl,
Aye.
Heck,
Aye.
Stevenson,
Aye.
Todd,
Abstain.
Williams, Woolsey,
Abstain.
Wu,
Aye.
and you.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone. Moving on to agenda item number 3, which is a discussion and possible action on recommendations related to the track and trace system. We have a subcategory A, operating during loss of connectivity with track and trace system. Let me get the background to read out so everybody has it clearly in front of them. Agenda item 3 is the background recommendation on to the track and trace system. We'll get down to the questions. Question for the advisory committee: should the licensing authority allow for cannabis goods to be transported between licensees during times when a licensee cannot access the track and trace system? If so, what requirements should be imposed to ensure the information is properly recorded? Current law, the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, CURSA, requires the movement of cannabis goods be recorded in the track and trace system. Business and Professional Codes, BPC, section 26067 and 26068, the licensing authority regulations do not allow for cannabis goods to be moved to other licensees if connectivity to the track and trace system is lost. According to Cal Code Regulations, Title 3, Section 8402B, and California Code Regulations, Title 16, Sections 5050B, and California Code Regs, Title 17, Sections 40513D. Considerations for the committee: contemporaneously tracking the movement of cannabis goods through the supply chain prevents diversion, ensures that taxes are collected properly, and allows government officials to determine if a person is properly in possession of the correct amount of cannabis goods. If cannabis goods are moved without using the track and trace system, how would the movement of cannabis goods be recorded to ensure all cannabis goods in the supply chain are accounted for and that the government officials can determine if a licensee is properly in possession of cannabis goods? So with that, I open it up to discussions of committee members.
Committee member Vice Chair Heidelberg, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I guess my first question, and this could either go to the general public, but also members of the committee, how often are we experiencing downtime in the track and trace system?
Thank you, Vice Chair Heidelberg. Committee member Nevdahl, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and make a comment.
Yes, thank you. This is Committee Member Nevadahl. I also have questions, so I'm wondering if we can get clarification about whether or not a licensee can still access the metric system, create and save a manifest when there is a loss of internet connectivity. Because I think we're talking about internet connectivity here, correct? That was my question. Thank you.
That is my understanding, Ms. Nevedal, but it could be power that causes loss of internet connectivity as well. So it could be broader than just the internet going down.
Thank you. Committee member Baboulian, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. This committee member Baboulian. A couple of comments on this one. With the fires and the situation in California, there are certain circumstances that do come up where you would lose connectivity. Most of it is going to be related to IT and power. So you've got the like PG&E that are doing the forced rolling blackouts. You got the fires that are knocking out power. Generally, we do need track and trace in the supply chain. So I think if we can come up with something where there's a bona fide cause for the power outage that prevents the licensee from being able to input the data in the track and trace, and then come up with certain criteria that would justify that, for instance, force the rolling blackouts, the fires being a cause and stuff like that. Maybe create a 72-hour window in those circumstances where people can input the data. But those are kind of the two main ones I see happening that will cause loss of power in IT.
Thank you, Committee Member Bullion. Director Parrott, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. This is Richard Parrott with the Department of Food and Agriculture. I did want to just provide clarification that what we are talking about is loss of access, and the committee members are correct in talking about essentially power outages or situations where a licensee loses connectivity to the internet. With regard to the system, the metric system having downtime, I did do a check-in. There have been a handful of instances in the past couple of years where the system was down, but it was maybe about 2 or 3 minutes in total. So I did want to add that clarification for the committee that it is, as Mr. Boboyan and the other members were talking about, situations where I think, for example, public safety power shutdowns or with the fires where there are power outages. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Parrott. Chair Farrow, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, and Director Parrott, with that also, there are areas, I remember when we were doing our, when we actually did in-person meetings and we had one up in Eureka, and one of the things we heard loud and clear from some of the cultivators in the area that there were internet spots that either never got signaled that would have been properly geographically licensed, but there were also ones where there was a range of in and out of internet that might not, might be without their control at all. Would this also potentially address those situations for people in more rural areas where they can't control the type of internet access they might have or the quality and regular strength of that?
I'm going to have Director Parrott answer first, and then I will get to Committee Member Nevdal. So go ahead, Director Parrott.
Thank you. Yes, this is Richard Parrott. Mr. Farrow, I unfortunately was not at that meeting up in Eureka, but I recall hearing about that conversation. I believe what we're talking about here, for example, if there are farmers in areas where they have spotty internet coverage, they're able to enter those transactions if, for example, if they had been tagging plants or harvesting plants. They're able to enter that information within a specific window of time. But I think what we're talking about here is that cannabis is not allowed to move between licensees when there's loss of access. And I believe it's because the system allows the generation of that manifest, and that's what's needed in order to move the product. I'm hoping that helps answer the question.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thanks.
Committee Member Nevdal, you can go ahead and make your comment.
Yeah, this is Committee Member Nevadal, and I do think it's important that a solution be created that allows for transfer of material during lack of connectivity. Some of these connectivity issues are prolonged. We've been pretty fortunate this year, except for in fire areas. But a lot of digital platforms, and I just don't use Metric on a regular basis at all. So a lot of digital platforms will have a desktop version. So I am hoping I can get more clarity on whether or not someone can still access Metric when they are not connected to it. Is there a way to go into it from your desktop and see the information and create a manifest and save it so that when your device reconnects, right, there's a timestamp and it uploads? Or is that not a feature that Metric offers?
Director Parrott, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Nevedal, this is Richard Parrott. What you're referencing as far as a desktop function, if I'm understanding correctly, would be a desktop feature that allows the transactions to be entered and have the licensee get what they need, and then when there's subsequent connectivity for that to be able to be put into the system and loaded up. I don't believe that we have that feature, but I'm taking notes from this and inquiring with the metric team, but I don't believe that that's a feature that's in there.
Thank you, Director Parrott. Are there any other committee members that wish to make a comment? If so, please raise your hand. Dr. Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. Moderator, if I can ask that you unmute Dr. Cermak. There you go. Go ahead.
This is Committee Member Cermak. I just want to that this seems incredibly burdensome on people, I'm aware that the alcohol industry does not have to have track and trace. Why is that? Because there's little or no illegal market for alcohol. The more we can make progress or eliminate, the less need there will be for such burdensome regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. Committee Member Yu, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Generally speaking, I believe that we should ensure that cannabis licensees aren't hindered by challenges in the IT system. So agree that there should be some type of backup process in place, whether it's a manifest or form for licensees to use when the system is down, so that the state can account for the products. But, you know, if this is outside the licensee's control, to make sure that this doesn't impact the licensees in a negative way, and that these transfers products can still happen and be accounted for.
Thank you, Committee Member Yu. Committee Member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. Okay, thank you. I see that your hand has been lowered. Is there any other committee members that wish to make a comment at this time?
So this is Committee Chair Farrow. We've had some comments about the challenges. Are there any committee members that would like to make a recommendation that gives direction to the agencies and the Bureau as they look to combine these regulatory structures going forward? We don't have to, I don't think we have to be prescriptive, but if there are particular issues you think are worth them considering as they put forward a new reg package, I think that would be helpful. If we don't think that is something we can do, we could either open up to public comment on this issue and maybe get some public comment that stimulate ideas for the committee, and then revisit it, recognizing then we would reopen up for public comment. So with that, is there any member that would like to make a recommendation, motion at this time by a show of hands?
Committee Member Stevenson, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sure, Committee Member Stevenson. I'm not sure if what I have to say goes back to the previous track and trace uploading information, but that's what it's in reference to, or if it's appropriate to add to the proposal that Chair Farrow brought forward. What I feel is in the best interest of all operators is that metric be giving a mandate to operate a cloud-based system like so many other point of sale operators have, to where if the system, if the electrical power is lost, that the transaction can be stored in the cloud and uploaded to the cloud and stored until further time that the operator has connectivity. So some of the point of sales do allow for the transaction of sales at the cash register, even though connectivity may be lost because the information is stored in the cloud. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Stevenson. I see no other committee member hands raised at this time, Chair.
So why don't we open up this agenda item for public comment? I'm sure with 140 people online, we should be able to find somebody who might be able to provide some thought on how we might approach this.
This is the
Moderator, we cannot hear you.
If you can give us a minute, we seem to be having some technical difficulty. We've lost our moderator. This is Committee Member Farrow. I'm going to ask that we take a short break in order to allow our IT people to reconnect our moderators so we can proceed. So why don't we take a 10-minute break? Be back at 10:50.
This is the moderator, and we are ready to proceed. Would you like to address the request for public comment?
I think we probably should take a roll call just to make sure that the committee members are back and that we have a quorum before we actually start taking the public comment. And then immediately upon achieving quorum, we can reopen for public comment.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just checking roll again. Can I have Bobulian?
Here.
Cermak?
Here.
Clifford?
Here.
Thank you. Farrow?
Here.
Thank you. Heidelback?
Here.
Thank you. Harada?
Here.
Thank you. Lynch? Committee Member Lynch, are you here? Okay. Committee Member Nevdahl?
Here.
Heck?
Here.
Stevenson?
Here.
Todd?
Here.
Thank you. Williams?
Here.
Thank you. Woolsey?
Here.
Thank you. Wu?
Here.
And you?
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Very good. Moderator, can you begin calling on public comment?
Absolutely. An individual identified as Wade Laughter, your microphone is going to be unmuted shortly. You will be provided a minute and a half to make your comments and provided a 20-second warning. With that, your microphone has been unmuted. Wade Laughter, you are unmuted. I'm going to move on to the next public comment. An individual identified is Andrew Dorset. Your microphone has been unmuted. Andrew, you are unmuted. Moving along to our next public comment.
Disconnected.
An individual identified as William Perno, your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. My name is William Perno, and my comment on this item is just a question regarding technology for the connection here. I heard discussion about internet connections, but I'm wondering if there's been any consideration for other types of technology to connect, such as satellites. And I would think of trucking companies and big rigs where those loads of materials are transported all across the country, and those companies can know exactly where they are at any time. And so I heard point of sale, but I'm also thinking of vehicle delivery as track and trace. Taking that and would that type of technology fill the gap. I have also thought about GPS devices that people can carry while they're out hiking or backpacking that they can communicate with there. So there are other types of technology, recognizing that there are internet dead spots and stuff there. But I'm wondering if the committee has any thoughts on that. Thank you for your time.
Our next public comment comes from an individual identified as Ross Gordon. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Morning, everyone. My name is Ross Gordon. I'm Policy Director with Humboldt County Growers Alliance, representing nearly 300 cannabis businesses based in Humboldt County, California. Wanted to pick up on a conversation that was had a little bit earlier, which is that this is not, from our perspective, or speaking with our farmers, just a connectivity issue, but also an IT issue. And it also deals with issues on the metric side. Talking to our farmers, I was actually talking with folks just on the break here, and it's not even just total loss of connectivity, but also sometimes that the system itself is so slow that it's not really possible to do anything. It just takes a really long time to upload data. And it's a particular problem for a lot of farmers because if you're farming, if you're an owner operator, you're blocking out part of your day to do metric entry yourself. And if you can't do metric entry at that point, it's a big problem. You don't necessarily have a separate metric employee. And I think this is really a larger issue. Connectivity can't really be disentangled from larger issues of IT and usability and of just general accountability for the track and trace system. I think what we have with the track and trace system, it causes tremendous frustration for farmers. I mean, it's probably the number one thing that we hear about from farmers. And it's because we effectively have a system of shadow regulations and effectively this entire IT system that doesn't have a clear method for providing feedback or making changes, or who do you go to either deal with these IT issues or some of the regulatory issues, which I would love to be able to get into. I'm disappointed they weren't agendized here, but there are so many issues with track and trace, and I would just hope the committee move forward with a larger assessment of track and trace and not just focusing on this one particular issue, which is really connected to everything else. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Eddie Franco. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, Eddie Franco, Legislative Liaison with the California Cannabis Industry Association. I'm going to be reading from some prepared comments we submitted to the committee on Friday evening. As it relates to item number 3, loss of connectivity can occur for a number of legitimate and unforeseen issues. For instance, and it has actually been brought up on this discussion already, many licensees have lost power due to the wildfires. It can also be assumed that PG&E will continue to periodically shut down power as a result of excessive energy consumption from high winds. So to ensure that the economic activity is not halted during this technological failure, licensing authorities should develop a regulation to prepare for this inevitability ahead of time, in lieu of prohibiting the transportation of consumer goods for the duration of the failure. We detail this more in our CCIA regulatory document under item 28, which I believe you have all received. But we just really want to make sure that there is a preparation for this loss of connectivity with metric in the regulations ahead of time, rather than having to transport the goods around and whatnot. Thank you.
Our next comment comes from Max Michalonis. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, good morning. Max Michalonis on behalf of Flow Cannabis Co. We speak in support of essentially allowing allowing for uploads to be done after the fact, to go and allow for disc products to be transported between two licensees, that to be recorded by the licensee that's sending the product, and then when connectivity is restored, that to be uploaded into track and trace. That's currently what's allowed with retail, with transfers to consumers being allowed to be occurring when there's a loss of connectivity and then upload afterwards. So distros seeking parity with retail on moving products between licensees. Additionally, it's important to note that this prohibition on moving products between licensees during loss of connectivity extends to vertically integrated operators, such that you could not, if the same licensee had multiple licenses that were even contiguous licenses, they cannot move them from one to the other during a loss of connectivity. So we ask that there be flexibility and simplicity in allowing movement to be
20
documented
seconds.
at the time and then uploaded after the fact. Thank you for your time.
Our next public comment comes from a Jennifer Galliarani. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. So this is Jennifer Galliarani. I'm making this comment on behalf of the California Distributors Association. I'd like to provide clarification on connectivity issues, reverberating what others have said, that it's not only a power outage issue, but also in other states we have experienced a metric complete system failure for more than 24 hours that creates a complete halt of all cannabis movement in those states. In California, I would like to have the committee consider a recommendation for distributors to be able to use paper manifests that were used during the transitional phase or prior to metric in the event of an outage. We could then have parity with retailers in that the transfer would be completed in paper form on those original manifest forms that were always used in the past. And similarly, and in with parity of all other retailers, we could have 3 calendar days to update the track and trace system once connectivity was reestablished.
Our next comment comes from Antoinette Duncan. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Antoinette Duncan, and I am with Cannabis Laboratory. It seems a little unclear as to what activity is allowed in metric during loss of connectivity, since Section 5050 allows a licensee to document all activity within 3 business days of restoring the connection. It would be helpful for licensees to have clarity on this. Also, we believe licensees do need an alternative for continuing to conduct their normal business during times when connectivity is lost. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, good morning. My name is Wade Laughter, and I'm with House of Harlequin. I'm a longtime user of cannabis for treatment of glaucoma. I am a patient advocate and would like nothing more than to see the regulated cannabis system in California work to the benefit of our people in this community and in our state. I want to thank all of you for your service on this committee. The metric system is a challenge, we'll say. And I would really beg the state, as we consolidate the regulatory agencies and move forward into a robust legal market, to remember people like myself, who I have two personal friends, good friends, who live in Mendocino and in Humboldt. Both of them have license. Both of them have fairly well-known operations. I won't name them, but they were forced to evacuate. And
20
because of
seconds.
fire, thank you. I would ask you to remember that many people are in the situation of my two good friends who had to make a choice, sometimes in minutes, of everything they wanted to save and run. And asking people to be able to make this manifest and then be able to move their product seems unfair. Help the legal market work. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Rand Martin. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. This is Rand Martin on behalf of Caliva. I want to echo the comments that were made by Jennifer Gallerani from the California Distributors Association. Over the last few months, several companies, including Caliva, have been working closely together and with CDFA relative to connectivity issues that are more than just loss of internet access, but they do relate to issues with Metric itself. Those issues we hope are going to get resolved from a regulatory and oversight standpoint. But in the meantime, we think it's important to ensure that if there is a connectivity problem, no matter how it's defined, that there is some alternative manifest development process that can be implemented so that the companies can continue to distribute the product. Thank you.
Our next public comment is from David Dickinson. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dave Dickinson. I'm a farmer in Humboldt County, and I've now had about a year to work with the metric system. And I just want to say that while I think loss of connectivity is a fairly simple problem, I think that can be solved technically. I think that the entire metric system and the way it works for farmers is a disaster. And I think it needs to be completely redone from the ground up. I mean, this is California, and we're the tech capital of the world, and the metric system, the way it works at my end, is an embarrassment, or at least it should be an embarrassment to the state of California. And I think it needs to be completely redone from the ground up, and perhaps even made into a completely phone-based system rather than having to, use a desktop computer or some other device to do data entry. It should be made completely simple, like any app that you would find on your phone. The way it is now is just unusable and unfriendly. Thank you.
This is the moderator, and due to some technical difficulties, I want to give the opportunity to Andrew Dorsett to make his public comment. Andrew Dorsett, your microphone has been unmuted.
Andrew Dorsett, Director of Compliance for Cureleaf for California. As stated by the person previously, the technical solutions to this are very easily fixed with satellite connectivity on and on. But I would like to echo that metric is a disaster. It's extremely burdensome across the board, from cultivators to distributors to retail manufacturers. The comment made about us being the tech capital of the world here in California is absolutely dead on. I'd like to just throw my support towards those comments. So that's all.
And our next public comment, or giving an individual the opportunity, comes from David R. You have been unmuted. David R., you are unmuted.
Yeah, I would disagree with the last two comments, basically. I just had a note about there possibly being a metric app already. I haven't used it personally, but there is a guide there. I mean, any sort of hardware that can be given to the cultivators could be very helpful in those disconnected times. That pretty much can help them upload their manifests and scan it and everything until the connectivity is reestablished. But yeah, I just mainly agree with the last two comments.
Mr. Chair, there does not appear to be any additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please. I'd just like to make note if you had wished to make a public comment or you felt that your public comment didn't have sufficient time, always feel free to send your comments to the BCC at the BCC email, and they will make them available to us, or they will use them in their consideration for the reg package that they put together. So thank you. And I will wait for the Q&A panel to close so I can ask the committee members if there are any recommendations by the committee after hearing from several public comments.
Vice Chair Heidelbeck, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate all of the public comment and folks' input, but I really think we need more information on this before we take any action. I think that there are some folks that seem to be stating that there are options when the system is down, that they're, if they've got 3 days to enter it into the system. And I realize that some of the public comment from past meetings where, some folks have made comments about this committee doesn't understand the industry. And I just want to remind folks that some folks on this committee are in the industry, and some of us work closely with the industry. And our job is to really ensure public safety. That's the point. So before we dismantle track and trace, I think there are more questions that need to be answered, first of all. And like another commenter said, this is California. In this, there's got to be another option before we walk this back. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Heidelbeck. Committee Member Nevdahl, I see that your hand is raised. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. This is Committee Member Nevdahl. It might be helpful to clarify how internet works and cell phones work for us who live in rural areas, because we can have satellite and we can have hotspots, but we rely on relayed signals. And so we have towers that go down, and we don't have access to broadband or cable. And so sometimes also when you're relaying signals, trees fall, major windstorms happen, and stuff will flicker on and off. So, and then there's also, I think we heard public comment about the speed at which metric will load and populate, data. That is exponentially challenging when you are in a rural area that doesn't have high-speed access. So even on a really great commercial plan, it is oftentimes that you end up getting sort of tamped down in your speed rate. So this is a significant issue in the rural areas. Hotspots and tethering, when you have a strong signal in an urban region without mountains and redwoods and valleys, and more towers in those areas to relay those signals, it definitely makes a huge difference. I do think there does need to be a way to remedy this so that folks are not disproportionately challenged by the metric system, on top of the other issues with PSPS and wildfires. And we have a lot going on in California, and the intention, I just want to reassure that I don't think the intention of allowing transfers during a lack of connectivity is to dismantle or walk back metric. It's that there's multiple reasons why a transfer may happen. Like, you might need to get your material out of the field and into a processor. And if you can't do that and Mother Nature calls, that is crop loss. So I do think this does need to be addressed. And there's some other folks who I think want to comment. So I will turn it over to my fellow committee members for additional comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Nevdahl. Committee Member Todd, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I was going to go ahead and make a motion. So I move that the committee recommend that the regulations be modified as necessary to allow for alternative methods and timeframes to enter information into the metric system that account for natural disasters, power outages, or other loss of connectivity or technology failure that will ensure that licensees can continue to operate uninterrupted.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd, but I am going to ask that you please repeat that and just go a little slower for.
Okay, is there like a chat thing that I could put it in, or I just need to read it out?
You have to read it out.
Okay. I move that the committee recommend that the regulations be modified as necessary to allow for alternative methods and timeframes to enter information into the metric system that account for natural disasters, power outages, or other loss of connectivity or technology failure that will ensure that licensees can continue to operate uninterrupted.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd. We got it this time.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Could you state the name of the person making the second?
Yes, Beverly, second.
Thank you, Beverly. With that, I'll open it up to the motion up to public comment.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the icon located in the lower portion of your screen and type "I would like to make a comment" and send to all panelists.
This is the co-moderator. I just went for the public so that they know what they are providing public comment on. The motion is that the committee recommends that regulations be modified as necessary to allow for alternative methods and timeframes to enter into information into the metric system that account for natural disasters, power outages, or other loss of connectivity or technology failure that will ensure that licensees can continue to operate uninterrupted.
With that, we do have some public requests for comment. An individual identified as William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted. Again, you will be given a minute and a half with a 20-second warning. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. This is William Perno, and my only comment is on the motion and the language it says, or failure or connectivity technology. And I would like the committee to consider clarifying their motion to note that this would be a failure that's outside of the control of the licensee. In other words, if there's a power outage, if there's a fire, I think we all understand that. But if they have a failure of technology that's their responsibility to maintain, I don't think that should be necessarily a reason to not be able to use the track and trace system. So there's a responsibility for the licensee to ensure that their equipment is maintained in proper working order. And if the failure is outside of their control, I think that makes a difference when there's a loss of connectivity. Thank you for your time.
Our next public comment comes from Jennifer Gallerani. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hello, thank you. This is Jennifer Gallerani representing the California Cannabis Distributors Association. We support the committee's motion to allow distributors to continue to operate when connectivity to the track and trace system is lost. I would like to provide clarity, as there seems to still be some confusion around what the regulations currently allow. Section 5050 under the BCC regulations currently prohibits the transfer of cannabis during loss of connectivity. Retailers are allowed to continue to do commercial sales and shore up the system within 3 calendar days. However, that provision is not afforded to distributors at this time. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Hannah Nelson. Your microphone is unmuted.
Yes, I would like to support the motion and appreciate its consideration. I would warn against modifying it regarding the person's, the licensee's responsibility and determining the outage. I think that in many situations, it could be difficult to determine whether or not the licensee failed to maintain versus their equipment just had a failure or whatever. So I think that that might be a difficult path to go down. And I encourage any additional clarification which would increase the flexibility as long as there are sufficient guidelines and processes to apply or to request for the flexibility in a variety of situations. Thank you.
Next, we have Robert Jones. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you very much. I recommend that the committee makes a promise to everyone who is here when they signed up that they will listen and they will implement based upon all the information they've gathered. And obviously, the industry needs your help to adapt and implement these changes. So I'm in big support of finding new opportunities and new ways for communication. We're on this learning curve, so let's continue to help the industry and implement laws to help the entire system. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Ross Gordon. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, everyone. Ross Gordon, Humboldt County Growers Alliance. Just wanted to echo Hannah Nelson's comment that the idea of trying to decide who's responsible for a loss of connectivity seems a little bit difficult. And I think also echoing the point about disproportionate impact on rural operators where those challenges about connectivity are just going to be larger, as has already been discussed. I think that's a difficult road to walk down. Would also like to add that this question about loss of connectivity, especially when it comes to farmers, but possibly also other parts of the supply chain, is really connected to an issue of how much data is required to be entered into track and trace. And from a farmer perspective, the amount of data which is not necessary data in our view, which is required to be entered, it's a big problem with labor. It's a big problem with time and energy and just getting it done. But it also relates to this connectivity issue because the connectivity becomes more of an issue the more data you're required to enter. And so I think a bigger conversation, not about dismantling track and trace, we totally, we understand why track and trace is there, but about how can that really be streamlined on all levels to reduce the amount of duplicative work which is required to be done and to be usable for everyone across the supply chain, whether they're in a rural area with low connectivity or any other area of the state or any
20
other
seconds. We have received no additional requests for public comment. Before I ask to close this feature, I do want to remind members of the public that we are not utilizing the hand raise feature. So if you currently have your hand raised and you can see that in your participant panel, please lower your hand by clicking on the hand raise icon once again. Mr. Chair, would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please. And could we take the roll, or if there's any committee member that wishes to consider anything else, please raise your hand.
Thank you. Committee Member Bogolian, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. This is Committee Member Bogolian. The comments I have on this motion is I think it's a little too broad. Track and trace, we either have it or we don't. Making it too broad just opens it up for a slippery slope. The main issue is this. There are a lot of reasons why a licensee will lose connectivity. Legitimate reasons that are outside of the licensee's control are really one or two examples, and those are the fires, those are certain circumstances like that, forced power outages, which usually generally don't last too long. So unless there's a real bona fide reason that the licensee can demonstrate, I think this is too broad of a motion. It opens it up for a lot of circumvention. And I can come out with 1,000,001 other reasons why this will end up being more of an issue than if we were to limit it to maybe a couple of exceptions, which again, the Bureau has really demonstrated a lot of leadership when it comes to certain circumstances that are outside of everyone's control, whether it was the response to COVID, whether it was a response to the fires and stuff like that. When there's a situation that comes up that just affects everybody across the board, the Bureau has done a really great job about just stepping forward and creating guidelines for it, whether it's the curbside pickups or different scenarios like this. This motion, a lot of the whole connectivity thing doesn't have to do with the retailers as much as it has to do with the distributors, and it's transferring product from one licensee to another licensee. So this isn't a consumer issue. This isn't a patient access type of issue because it doesn't apply to the retailers. It wouldn't affect them. So I would just suggest that we take a lot of that stuff into consideration and really understand what are we opening up by loosening and broadening it without really limiting to one or two exceptions. That's all I would add.
Thank you, Committee Member Bogolian. Committee Member Todd, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just speak to why I think it's good that it's broad, as it's my motion, and that I don't think first of all, we're not prescribing or saying to the regulators, this is what the regulation should be. I think it's more of a recognition of that. And it's also not saying get rid of the metrics or the track and trace system, or that and somehow is not important to preserve and to maintain. I think it's simply acknowledging that we live in extremely complicated times where there's a lot of collective challenges that people are facing. There's a lot of individual challenges that businesses are facing. There's a lot of regional variation around the state. So I think I view the motion as more just saying, we're not getting rid of metrics, we're not getting rid of track and trace, but the rule as written is not accommodating a whole range of circumstances. So is there a way we can be more thoughtful in preserving the purpose, but making it work for more areas of the state and across the state, and in the event of all sorts of different challenges that we're facing, some anticipated and some not. So I don't think it throws out metrics. I don't think it prescribes this is the way how it has to be done. I think it's more in the spirit of we trust that you can look at the regulation and improve upon it to make it work for more license holders in the state.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd. Are there any other committee members that wish to make a comment at this time? Chair, I do not see any other members raising their hands.
So can we take a roll call, because I don't believe the comments rose to the point of additional public comments. Am I correct? Council says that I'm correct. So can we call the roll?
Yes, and I will repeat the motion first, and I will ask that Committee Member Todd listen and let me know if I have it correct. The motion is that the committee recommend that regulations be modified as necessary to allow for alternative methods and timeframes to enter information into the metric system that account for natural disasters, power outages, or other loss of connectivity or technology failure that will ensure that licensees can continue to operate uninterrupted. Committee Member Todd, is that correct?
It is.
Thank you. And with that, I will call the roll. So starting with Bobulian.
Nay.
Thank you. Cermak.
Aye.
Thank you. Clifford.
Aye.
Farrow.
Aye.
Heidelbach.
Nay.
Harada.
Aye.
Huffman. Oh, I'm sorry. Lynch.
Aye.
Nevdal.
Aye.
Heck.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Thank you. Todd.
Aye.
Thank you. Woolsey.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Wu.
Aye.
Thank you. And you.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Well, before we move on to agenda item 4, I'd just like to make a comment, a point of personal privilege, is that I understand the concerns of Committee Member Bobulian and Vice Chair Heidelbach, but I do understand the spirit of Committee Member, why am I drawing a blank on your last name, Tamar? But
Todd.
sorry.
We got the Sweeney Todd to remind you each time.
Thank you. I'm sorry. But what I do think we are in the advisory role, there's been a good comment to this. I think the licensing agencies are going to have a good amount of public comment related to this and consideration. There's obviously a variety of things. But one thing I do think we should make sure is, just as a recommendation, not as a motion and a vote and a committee comment, is that we really should have the agencies working closely with the matrix system or whatever track and trace system they will be using to try to ensure that they have the best outcomes for our licensees and for the public, to make sure that we are able to track and trace everything, and that we do everything within our power to ensure that the budgeting for this work is made available. So that way, because there's a budgeting cost for doing all these technology improvements. So with that, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 4, and I will read the background and recommendations in current law. So agenda item number 4 is the sale and consumption of cannabis goods and non-cannabis food items on licensed retail premises. Question for the advisory committee: should the Bureau develop specific requirements for on-site consumption of cannabis goods in addition to any requirements imposed by the local jurisdictions? Should the Bureau also amend the regulation to allow retailers to sell non-cannabis related food items or non-cannabis food items? And if so, what requirements should apply? The current law is Business and Professions Code Section 26-200, subsection G, authorizes a local jurisdiction to allow the consumption of cannabis products on the premises of a licensed retailer. The Bureau regulations do not currently include specific provisions for on-site consumption of cannabis goods. California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 5407 prohibits the sale of non-cannabis food and beverages by a licensee. Considerations. Allowing the sale of non-cannabis food and beverages will require licensees to also comply with all rules related to the sale, preparation, and services of food and beverage, which is not regulated specifically by the Bureau. Additionally, the Bureau's regulations for the licensed premise and enforcement activities would need to be adapted to account for this new activity. For example, regulations would be required addressing where and how food and beverage items must be stored and consumed, access to these items, and how records must be kept in regards to non-cannabis food and beverage sales. The amount of cannabis goods that can be carried. Am I moving to the next one? So we'll tackle that section first. Do we have any committee members that would like to discuss the current law and the considerations that are being put before us?
Any committee members that wish to make a comment, please go ahead and raise your hand. Committee member Woolsey, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, just one question I have regarding if this regulation were to pass, who would be responsible for training inspectors to then be aware of other non-cannabis food safety precautions and licensing, or would those kinds of inspections fall to a different agency? And who would be responsible for ensuring that those inspections happen and paid for by the state?
I think we should hand that off to our counsel if she's prepared with answer that.
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre, counsel for the Bureau. The Bureau would have to take a closer look as to how, sorry, there's a bit of feedback. The Bureau would have to examine the intricacies as to how that would be implemented, but the committee may make recommendations as far as the types of regulations that should be considered for allowing non-cannabis food and beverages to be sold as part of that process.
Thank you.
Committee member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. You can unmute yourself, or moderator, can you please unmute Dr. Cermak? Thank you.
My sense is that if this is going to be leading in the direction of dispensaries associating with and becoming restaurants and grocery stores, which would clearly please a lot of consumers, I think we're too early in the legalization to open anything up to going in that direction.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. Committee Member Bogoyan, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Davis. I wanted to echo what Dr. Cermak just said. Normally, the license is not the business. The license simply authorizes an activity. When you start getting into, so you got two sides to this. You've got the consumption part of it, and you also have the portion where can you sell other things that are non-cannabis related. Now, I understand that a lot of the interest is more along the lines of like soda and candy and stuff like that, but if you take that approach, any existing business that's a non-cannabis business, all they would have to do is pick up a consumption license or a retail license and just provide as an additional product that they sell in their store. So it's going to be a lot of, one, on the competition side, it's a hell of a lot of competition for the existing retailers. Two, I think the whole consumption needs to be separated from what else you can sell. Generally, when you go to a dispensary, you're going there for cannabis. You're not really going there for anything else. there are certain other products that a dispensary can sell to be able to upsell and make a little more money, a little more profit. But again, going back to what Dr. Cermak said, nothing will prevent existing businesses that are non-cannabis related simply picking up one of these licenses. Now they're in direct competition with the dispensaries, and I guess it's me, a lot of it just thinking out loud. But I would like to put that out there so people do take that into consideration.
Thank you, Committee Member Boboyan. Committee Member Nevdal, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello, this is Committee Member Nevadal. I do think that, again, there is a lot of variability around the state about what kind of models might work locally. And I think we've seen challenges where limiting what consumption looks like on retail sites ends up in, potentially failed businesses. West Hollywood has looked at a cafe model and created ordinance for that and a pathway for that doesn't necessarily fit into the state. And I do think there is a lot of value in social consumption, especially when we see patients. I'm sorry, there's a plane going by. Let me. I'm so sorry for the noise. There is value in allowing social consumption, especially when you have in urban areas populations of people who maybe cannot consume in their residences or have a hard time finding an appropriate location to consume medicine. Additionally, other municipalities have looked at consumption in a variety of lights, everything from farm tours and there being able to be tasting similar to what's offered in the wine industry. And while local jurisdictions have welcomed this into their ordinances, there's not a pathway. So I do think that there is a need to figure out how to potentially even defer some of this back to the local, like create some lean, mean allowances at the state level, but then let the locals shape it a little bit more because they're going to be the immediate point of contact and a lot of times for local concerns and as well as enforcement. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Committee Member Nevdal. Committee Member Todd, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to actually echo some of what Committee Member Nevedal said, that I think, first of all, I think there's a lot of middle ground between saying every grocery store can now sell cannabis and every cannabis retailer can now sell any other products. I think there's the potential for us to recommend something much more narrow than that does address, I think, the local models that are being explored and has a little bit more creativity around how to make a more meaningful space for people who want to consume cannabis on site and maybe also want to be able to eat other food while they do it or have another type of beverage while they do it. That can, of course, fall far short of just saying now cannabis is going to be sold everywhere and everything else is going to be sold where cannabis is sold. And I do think I think allowing spaces, meaningful spaces for on-site consumption is a really important public policy issue, given that a lot of people's living situations are very restricted in terms of where they consume. There's certainly patients who are not allowed to consume in their own homes because of some of those restrictions on where you can consume and on what property and whether you can smoke in different areas. Of course, public consumption isn't allowed. And so I think we need to encourage the creation of meaningful places where people can consume on site and make them places where people want to. With restrictions so that it's not everywhere. I obviously don't think combining consumption of alcohol on site with cannabis would be a good thing. So I don't think bars should be, that serve alcohol should be allowed to do it. But I think we could come up with something much more narrow that would allow a better on-site consumption option for the local communities and jurisdictions that are exploring it to create flexibility in the rules that would allow for that.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd. Committee Member Wu, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just want to take this moment to kind of bring up a recurring point, which is, this is something that's important, and obviously our primary concern is public safety, but it's hard to really, for me, to opine on it until we see a lot more kind of data, if you will. I've always been kind of just saying that, VCC should take a leading role in aggregating data, or, at least scrubbing data, and there's a lot of stuff out there, but knowing what to trust, not what not to trust. But BCC can provide more data as we're thinking about important things like this. That would be very helpful to me.
Thank you, Committee Member Wu. Committee Member Lynch, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I want to recognize what Member Todd had to say in terms of that there may be space in the future to think through this, but I do agree with Dr. Cermak that it's just too early here, as well as the comments made by Wu and others. I also think that when we talk about wanting to ensure that that we have a vibrant legal community, I worry about too much competition, undermining those efforts. And so for those reasons, I think expanding it would be premature.
Thank you, Committee Member Lynch. Committee Member Boboyan, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, DeSavis. I think a lot of this can be resolved with two different things. One of it, allowing the retailers to allow for on-site consumption. We used to have that before regulations. A lot of dispensaries, especially in LA, they would allow for on-site consumption. It wasn't most of them, but you did have that model out there. I think the lounge business is a phenomenal business. For the cannabis industry, it's a really great segue into it. West Hollywood's tried it. Theirs was a little bit different in allowing for more of a cafe model going on. But there really is no reason to not allow for consumption lounges. And in a consumption lounge, being able to provide non-alcoholic beverages such as coffee, tea, regular drinks and stuff. And it doesn't have to be overly broad. It doesn't have to be expanded. Going back to what I said about the license simply authorizing an activity, I think we just allow for the retailers to provide on-site consumption as long as the local jurisdiction allows it. That takes care of that portion of it. And as far as the lounge, it could be as simple as creating the additional license type, no different than dispensary and delivery, allow for a lounge license. That does open it up. That does provide opportunity for patients and just general consumers to have a safe place to go and consume, no different than if you were to go to a bar for a drink. And it creates additional revenues, it creates additional jobs, it creates additional business opportunities, but it also limits the competition to the existing dispensaries. As it is, the dispensaries right now are competing against the black market. The last thing they need is other traditional businesses simply getting a license and adding on one more product that they can sell to a dispensary. The additional problem that would create is you have multiple departments and agencies that now are responsible for oversight on all the different activities that happens within the business. And as an industry, I just don't think we're there yet to be able to coordinate that kind of effort with a lot of different agencies and departments. So if there's a recommendation there, I would say just allow for the retailers to allow for the product to be consumed on site and also create an additional license type specifically for lounges.
Thank you, Committee Member Boboyan. Committee Member Todd, I see that your hand is still raised. Is that from before, or are you wishing to make additional comments? If so, you can.
Sorry, it was from before. I'll take it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Chair Farrow.
The only thing that I would, want to discuss, and I think it's been able to be done, is that, it is possible to allow non-alcoholic beverages to be brought in with you, I would imagine, to one of these consumption lounges, or you could deliver, DoorDash or some other food if you were hungry. My concern is if you add the need for a food handler's license, and then you have to have, other departments, maybe from the state, maybe from the city, that create complications in being able to already run a very complex business. I tend to believe that, as long as there's not a restriction to people bringing their own or their own regulated products in to consume in a facility that sells those regulated products, or bring alcohol in, not bringing alcohol in. I think that should, kind of address some of these concerns. I do agree with you that there's been some really good efforts by, West Hollywood and others to come up with a model that allows, the social aspect of consumption and address the issues of so many people living in rental properties that might preclude them from being able to medicate or consume on site where they live. It's an important piece, and we don't want people consuming, out in public. So having a safe space for people to be able to consume and to be able to address the issues like Committee Member Baboulian talked about, is having tea or coffee, bringing it with them or having it delivered in, seems to be a good solution, at least early on, till we get a more stable industry.
Committee Member Todd, I see that your hand is raised.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking one way, because I hear my fellow committee members, legitimate points that I also completely agree with about always wanting more data and learning more about how things are going to change and develop before we have a major shift on a larger scale. It makes me think of that we do learn a lot through pilot projects, or one, obviously in the context of cannabis, the state doing something and then other states learning from what that state has done. That, another possible path forward would be to allow or to recommend that there's built into basically a exemption from the rules or a change in the rules based on a local ordinance that wants to try out a project, whether it be a pilot project or their local ordinance. They want to allow for cannabis lounges to function in a certain way, and they can get permission from the state to move forward with that project. And then it would be an example that we would be able to learn and develop future statewide policy from. So it's just definitely a model that's happened in other contexts that I could see being useful here.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd. Committee Member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. You can unmute yourself.
From a public health standpoint, the only problem I can see with allowing on-site consumption in a social atmosphere or lounge sort of thing is whether or not how people transport themselves home. If it's illegal for people to be driving while under the influence, that's the only problem that I can see, and that could probably there would be ways to handle that. I can also envision that in a situation where there's lounges that are not selling any other foods, that there would soon be a franchise of very nearby stores called Munchies that would provide all the foods that someone might want to take into the lounge. But it still would, even that would prevent the idea of the kind of competition that Baboulian was saying would really be very, very difficult on the dispensaries.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. Committee Member Todd, I still see that your hand is raised. Are you wishing to make additional comments?
No, sorry, I clearly just have a problem putting my hand down.
That's okay. Committee Member Cermak, I still see that your hand is raised as well.
I will try to get it down soon. No further comment.
Okay. Chair, I do not see any additional committee members' hands raised.
Very good. Well, we've had some good conversation. Is there any one of our committee members that wish to make a motion? If I don't see one, then I will put it out for public comment. Looks like we have one hand.
Committee Member Baboulian, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. This is Avis. I would like to make a motion for the Bureau to create a license category for lounges.
Thank you, Committee Member William.
Member Heidelbach, I'll second.
Thank you, Member Heidelbach. I'd like to open it up to public comment.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon located in the lower portion of your screen and type, "I would like to make a comment." I will take all requests in the order they are received. It does appear I have received a request. An individual by the name of Deborah Goldsberry, your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Debbie Goldsberry. I'm the CEO of Magnolia Wellness, a dispensary in Oakland with more than 25,000 active members. We've had a city license for on-site cannabis consumption since 2016. And before that, I had an on-site cannabis consumption license in Berkeley for 10 years at Berkeley Patients Group. At Magnolia, we do have a full kitchen, having taken over a restaurant and bar for our retail dispensary. Before 2018, we had numerous events with food service. This includes inviting local chefs to serve food, hosting fancy dinners, having food trucks in our parking lot, and offering light snacks and drinks to people while they were at the facility. Cannabis and food and beverages go perfectly together. People use cannabis and they want to eat and drink too. The simple ability to buy a beverage or snack at a dispensary makes sense. Many dispensaries are in the outskirts of town. They're food deserts. There's no place to get food or drinks, and having this on site is a needed service. At Magnolia, we'd like to fulfill our original vision where, yes, we sell cannabis, but where we also provide people in our community with an experience that includes the possibility of sitting down, consuming cannabis, and enjoying a meal, snack, or beverage. The regulatory requirements for food service are highly manageable for people in the industry, as we are all used to complying with complicated life safety rules, and these could easily be governed by the local health departments. In conclusion, the pairing of cannabis and food is a natural one, and in places like Oakland, where we have 8 new dispensaries looking for retail locations and numerous restaurants in jeopardy of going out of business, we could stimulate growth in our community with this sensible proposal. And frankly, we're hungry. Thank you for your time.
Our next public comment comes from Jason Sarouche. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Members of the committee, my name is Jason Sarouche from the Getting It Right from the Start project at the Public Health Institute. I'm commenting in opposition of allowing the sale and consumption of non-cannabis food items in licensed retail premises that also allow the sale and consumption of cannabis goods, because it would create an environment that would make our roadways a lot more dangerous. According to the U.S. Department of Transportation, in 2018, there were 10,511 people killed in alcohol-impaired driving crashes, which accounted for 29% of all motor vehicle traffic fatalities in the United States that year. Aside from the plethora of research showing cannabis does impair reaction time and other factors involved with driving ability, I think we can all agree that we don't want people driving a car after consuming cannabis. The unfortunate reality is that police officers do not currently have an accurate roadside test for cannabis intoxication, and even if they did, as exists for alcohol, the problem doesn't go away. Creating social environments to eat while consuming cannabis will exacerbate drug driving, already a major problem. In addition to this, I'd also like to speak as a trained chef and a registered dietitian, and having worked in many different food service environments. When a recipe calls for a teaspoon of cumin, most chefs aren't going to use a measuring spoon. They're going to eyeball it. The idea of allowing food and cannabis consumption in the same premises will inevitably create a path to more cannabis restaurants, and I fear that without a robust system of checks and balances, there will be major issues with cannabinoid dosage and homogeneity in what I'll call the retail cannabis-infused food service environment. Thank you so much for your time.
Our next public comment comes from Eddie Franco. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, committee members. Eddie Franco, Legislative Liaison with the California Cannabis Industry Association. The licensing authority should establish a pathway by which a licensed retail premises may allow for cannabis consumption and sell non-cannabis infused food, beverage, cosmetics, and dietary supplements. Additionally, we think that the licensing authority should consider broadening the definition of licensed retail premises to provide a pathway for the retail sale and consumption of cannabis goods at qualifying bed and breakfast facilities, hotels, cafes, farm tours, seasonal farm stands, and the like. Expanding this definition of licensed retail premises would help support economic development and would align state regulations with local permitting allowances being developed and already developed in places like the city of West Hollywood and Humboldt County, for example. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Danny Kurtz, your microphone. Actually, Danny, I do not see an audio connection for you. So if you would like to try and call in, you can go to the top of your ribbon and find a call-in number there. I'm going to move on to our next request for public comment. Jackie Subek, your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jackie Subek, and I'm a consumption lounge licensee in West Hollywood. I'm hearing some of the committee members discussing the impacts on dispensaries, but I'm here to talk about the specific impact to consumption lounges. I submitted a thorough written comment on these issues, and I encourage each of you to take the time to review these comments as they carefully outline how these two issues critically impact the lounges. Some lounges want to operate as full-blown restaurants. Most lounges will want to be able to sell some food, and all lounges want to maintain customer safety. And none of this includes the extra challenges that lounges are incurring due to COVID as hospitality businesses. Back in 2019, in the emergency regulations, Section 5407 included the language to allow for compliance with local jurisdiction. This language was removed in subsequent drafts, so now the lounges can't even sell a bottle of water to their customers, much less anything to offset the effects that consuming cannabis may have, including increased appetite and the need for regular hydration. First off, I absolutely do not support committee members Balbullian's suggestion to create a statewide consumption license, as it only complicates the matter. The state does not know the local communities as well as local governments. Consumption should be continued to be regulated by local control as defined in Section 26200 of the BPC. And finally, I absolutely do not support Member Farrow's suggestion to have customers bring their own. Lounges are very expensive to set up and cannot afford to offload potential revenues to third-party businesses. This would immediately render our lounge businesses non-viable. I ask that you either reinstate the local jurisdiction language to Section 5407 or consider an alternate regulatory pathway to achieve the same objective. Thank you.
Going back to public requests from Danny Kurtz, your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the time. I know this is a smidgy off topic, but I want to talk about how there's no consumption for any license, not just retail, considering the distributions and manufacturers or even cultivators. They're not allowed to consume on site. I think that should be changed for just mainly R&D purposes and things like that. I don't see why the owner of the company, can't consume my own product on site for any reason.
This is the co-moderator. So we are only taking public comment right now on the motion about the Bureau creating a license category for lounges. So this is what we are taking public comment on at this time. There will be a chance for members to bring up comments on additional items or comments that are not on the agenda later. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Max Michelanos. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, good afternoon. Max Michelanos on behalf of Flow Cannabis Co. We support the concept of a consumption lounge, but moreover want to speak in support of allowing licensees, licensed retailers, licensed consumption lounges to serve non-cannabis goods on site. I think it's important to understand that in places like West Hollywood, licensees have found a way to go and have sales of food and beverages. And the answer to that simply has been to have a cannabis business adjacent to a non-cannabis restaurant, potentially even under the same roof with a shared area. And so I think that, rather than forcing a cannabis licensee to go and create a separate business, create a separate premises, to go and just do the restaurant aspect of it. We should be seeking simplification. We should be acknowledging that these business models are already happening. There's a demand for this from consumers, and there's a significant potential once we are through COVID for consumption and based models to really flourish. And so we would ask that the state take an accommodating approach on consumption and on the sale of non-cannabis goods at licensed retailers. As mentioned by Ms. Subek, where the regulation was changed between emergency regs 2.0 and final regulations. Thank you for your time.
Next, we have Tony Bowles. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon, committee. Tony Bowles here, Bay Area Chapter of Americans for Safe Access. Sale and consumption of cannabis goods and non-cannabis food items should be allowed on licensed retail premises. As a patient advocacy organization, we absolutely support regulated retail establishments that allow consumption lounges and provide food and beverages. The sooner a patient can consume their medicine, the better. Patients don't always have a safe space to medicate, especially if they live in federal housing. Studies have shown patients recover faster in a social setting. To adequately meet the needs of those consuming cannabis, non-food and beverages need to be offered by operators to ensure health and safety, like preventing patients from driving to get food. Not only is cannabis essential, it's essential to drink plenty of fluids and to fill up on food before and during your cannabis experience. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Marnie Berger. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening. I'm calling in from Covelo, and I wanted to share that intentional communities raise vibrations, and people gather for different reasons, and that's where healing happens. And consumption might be a joint and a bottle of water and a bag of chips, or an orange from a local grower. And that is not going to put any other business out of business. It would be like saying Bevmo's going to go out of business because a vineyard sells a bottle of wine. Small growers should be allowed to have lounges and consumption on their farms and sell directly to consumers without any distributors. We can do our own testing.
This is the co-moderator again. I would just like to interrupt and say we are only taking public comment on the item that.
Okay, I'll continue. People go to bars and drink, and they figure out ways to get home. Cannabis lounges can assist with rides, calling rides, having numbers available if people need rides home. And there's a lot of data already out. I hear people asking for more data. There's data available on normal, NORML.com. There is research that says cannabis alone poses far less impact on the psychomotor skills needed.
Time had been reached. Our next public comment comes from Sienna Schenkel. Your microphone has been unmuted. Sienna, you are unmuted. Moving on to our next request comes from Kathleen Lippett. Your microphone has been unmuted. Kathleen? Next public comment is from Nasser Azimi. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good afternoon. This is Nasser Azimi
co-founder of Ohana Cannabis. We are based out of Emeryville in Bay Area and are fortunate to have an on-site consumption permit from the city. We don't offer prepared food on site. We cater all of the food that is brought in from time to time, predominantly because we found that customers have this incredible desire to understand microdosing of cannabis products. It goes a long ways to educate them about how properly dose cannabis so that it does not create an uncomfortable experience for them. We believe this should be a local decision and made available across the state. I like the idea of picking a series of cannabis operators to pilot it so that data is made available. But we found the elder community to be very focused on this particular scenario because they really prefer to consume cannabis in ways that does not create an uncomfortable experience for them. We also believe cannabis consumption
20 seconds.
in a responsible fashion to be the future of cannabis retail. We would like to see this expand on a statewide scale.
Next, we have Joanna Cedar. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Good afternoon. I believe that there's no need for a separate license. The license already exists, and it just means a broadening of the definition of dispensary to include consumption lounges, beds and breakfasts, farm stands, and it should be an easy checkbox add-on to the already existing license. Thank you very much.
Next public comment comes from David R. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yeah, basically, I mean, I didn't have much more comments in my text, but I do agree that there should be some additional licensing, but it should attach right onto your current retail. There are other, issues that come with a food industry and having a lounge set up, so making sure all of that is addressed, obviously. And then beyond that, I think outside food and beverage would greatly affect these lounges, so I don't think it's a great idea for multiple reasons, but yeah, that's all I have.
Next, we have Robert Jones. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. During this time, we have a lot of bankruptcies that are about to hit the market. We have a lot of depressed individuals about to hit the market or in the market. So we need these lounges. We need to have water in those lounges. We need to have them communicate and talk to each other. So we need to start thinking outside the box. We have to help these industries and these companies and these dispensaries and these lounges and everyone. So on the lounge issue, let's do it. Let's open it up. Let them try some new things and generate new revenues and generate revenues for not only the state, but at the same time, it keeps them off the streets. We're talking about patients. We have illegal lounges already. And at the same time, they're off the road. They're off the road. So we can provide nutritional meals or things like that. So come on, let's think outside of the box and let's help the industry instead of too many rules and handcuffing them. We have to release the handcuffs. Thank you.
Next public comment comes from Lynn Silver. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. This is Dr. Lynn Silver from the Public Health Institute. We would strongly oppose modifying existing regulations to allow food or anything else to be sold or consumed at cannabis retailers. We would also strongly oppose the motion to create a lounge category, which is already an option under local control. As in most states, cannabis retailing should remain a unique and specialized commercial activity. While we support safe and legal access, it is still an addictive and harmful product. Our public policies should balance assuring legal access, safe legal access, with not adopting policies that will encourage expansion of use, creating social environments that normalize cannabis consumption with the most basic of human social activities, eating, will significantly contribute to social normalization and expansion of consumption. The state wisely did not allow that in the past. That should not change. Furthermore, it is likely to contribute to drug driving, as previously noted. Cannabis restaurants or food stores would not replace existing bars or restaurants. They would simply create additional venues and additional risks which we need to address. It would also not be about beautiful food or patient needs. It would be about people stopping for a bite while taking a hit on a dab break or consuming other highly potent products that are an increasingly large part of the market.
20 seconds.
Furthermore, the Society of Engineering has also noted that you cannot create an indoor environment with safe air for employees where there is smoking or vaping. And recent research by UCSF in cannabis on-site locations has furthermore confirmed these high levels of particulate matter exposing workers in on-site consumption language. So we oppose the motion and ask that food.
Time had been reached. Our next public comment comes from Khurshid Koha. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, moderator. Khurshid Koja, Greenbridge Corporate Counsel. Would just want to echo the comments made by Ms. Subek and Mr. Michalonis. I believe just on principle that licensed cannabis retailers should be allowed to sell other legal goods at their retail locations, and whether it's food and drink or other non-cannabis goods as well. So I don't think that we want to further restrict retailers. I think a sign of a mature market is that our retailers are treated no differently than any other business in retail. So with the exception of the presence of cannabis and the overlay of cannabis regulations. Would also endorse what the comments that committee members Nevidal and Todd made as well. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that nuanced approach and being able to allow all these different business models that are starting to flourish. I don't think that the Bureau or any regulator should be getting in the way of that. We should be encouraging that. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Rebecca Stamey White. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Great, thank you. My name is Rebecca Stamey White. I'm an attorney representing both the alcohol and cannabis industries. I support the sale of non-cannabis goods at licensed retailers, as well as the introduction of statewide consumption lounge licenses. I don't think it has to be an either or, it can be both. There are almost 50,000 on-sale alcohol retail licenses and close to 30,000 off-sale alcohol retail licenses in California. By contrast, there are less than 1,000 off-sale cannabis retail licenses and less than 100 cannabis consumption lounges in the state. California needs more retail outlets for cannabis in order to have a successful, thriving legal industry. So whatever way we do that, I support, recognizing that the local communities can protect the public health and safety through existing planning and regulatory controls. Thank you.
This is the moderator, and a reminder to all members of the public, we will not be acknowledging the hand raise feature. So if you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your screen and submit "I would like to make a public comment." Moving on to our next request for public comment comes from Andrew Dorset. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, Andrew Dorset, Director of Compliance for California for Curaleaf. I'd just like to put our support behind the allowance for retail and lounges to sell food and beverages. We also fully support the expansion of consumption from a comment earlier. We think it just makes sense. Mirror it as the alcohol industry does with appropriate safeguards in place, but there's no reason not to allow this. We also believe it should be included under a retail license, not as a separate license. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Eric Schuyler. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, thank you very much. This is Eric Sklar. I'm the founder and CEO of Fume. We're a vertically integrated cannabis company, and I'd really like to encourage you to raise the case limit. The $3,000 and $5,000 case limits are really arbitrary and don't make any sense. We sent information in
This is
previously.
the co-moderator. We are still just taking comments on the first motion, which is to recommend that the Bureau create a license category for lounges. We have not gotten to the agenda about case limits.
I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we do not have any additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes.
Co-moderator, I believe I see a public commenter by the name of Kathleen Lippett. I don't know if she's been able to provide her comment yet.
This is the moderator. I do believe so, but I will double check. Kathleen Lippett, you are unmuted. Kathleen? With that, there are no additional requests. Well, actually, I take that back. We did receive a new one just in, an individual by the name of Ed Brown. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, yeah, thank you. My name is Ed Brown, founder of the Original Equity Group. As everybody knows, the Bureau is in charge of regulating weed, and that's really what this call is about. I think it's too premature to look into being able to sell non-cannabis beverages and goods. As you guys already know, and for those in the industry, margins are already slim with retailers. And so are you telling me now, if we pass something like this, now retailers are going to have to compete with, other retailers who are now selling food items to be able to draw people in there? Again, this just kind of raises the bar on the industry that's really not settled yet. And you have people that are still trying to participate in this industry, mainly equity applicants who are trying to get through, navigate this process and also navigate their business models. This seems like a unfair proposition that gives larger retailers and those with a bigger market share a chance to be able to increase their market share. I do believe that we do need to have lounges, then it's already built in for you to be able to have that.
20
and I
seconds.
think those are discussions for local levels to be able to have. We could talk about some other things here, but thanks for your time.
An individual identified as William Perno. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. And I have had my question into comment. I don't know why it wasn't noted before you were going to close public comment. This should be a public health and safety thing decided at the local level. I would oppose lounge category for licenses. And Prop 64 allows for local control and local decision making. There are definitely drug driving concerns, including polydrug use. A small amount of alcohol greatly increases the psychoactive effects of THC. There are smoke-free laws for indoor businesses in California. What is being done to ensure if there are other businesses at the same location that there is not second or third-hand smoke contamination for these businesses? Public consumption of cannabis is occurring just about everywhere. We don't see this for alcohol, and there is little to no enforcement on the ban of public consumption of cannabis in California. Cannabis can be consumed as an edible. It does not need to be smoked or vaped. This includes consumption at a residence for a person who is using cannabis with a doctor recommendation. We have a COVID-19 pandemic, and indoor consumption is a bad thing to even be thinking about right now. Is this the right time to be talking about consumption lounges and the secondhand smoke that has THC as well as potentially transmitting a very contagious virus? Regarding sales of other food products and non-alcoholic beverages, at the California Cannabis Control 2020 Summit virtual conference on September 8th to September 10th, there was discussion about cannabis businesses having a separate space outside of their licensed footprint for food and beverages due to the IRS Rule 280 and no tax deductions for cannabis businesses. Collection of taxes for cannabis sales, how will this be impacted, and where will there be cannabis audits for the sales? How will you determine what
10
was
seconds.
sold? How will you determine what was sold as a food item and what was sold as a cannabis product? And is this an opportunity for some of those cannabis sales to be missed? I know the chair, Farrell, was the speaker at the attendee at the summit, and I hope he can comment on Rule 280E. Thank you.
At this time, we have no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please, moderator. And I put it back to the committee for, we got a lot of good input. We have comments about it being okay already, not needing a special license, one's not wanting a license at all, and some comments that people don't want them, even though it's permitted already under local control. So we got a lot of stuff to wade through. We do have a motion, so I'll leave it at that. If anybody wants to make any comment from the committee, please do so. And if not, we'll call the roll.
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre, counsel for the Bureau. Just a point of clarification for committee member Babolian. The motion on the floor is for the Bureau to create a license category for lounges. Do you mean commercial cannabis consumption lounges?
Yes.
Thank you. Bureau staff will note that in the minutes.
Committee member Lynch, I see your hand is raised. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment, having heard the public comment and others. Really want to speak against this motion. I agree with members here in the public comments that this should be addressed at the local level, oppose any new consumption license, and also believe that the local level is really better situated to address the important equity issues that the public comment made.
This is committee member Cermak. I'm having trouble finding my hand again. I just want to make the comment that I agree that the local level is the proper place for this to be taken care of. On a state level, we would be making decisions for localities that may not be ready or agreeable with allowing this within their jurisdictions. So I think keeping it in the local level is the most democratic way to go.
Thank you, Dr. Cermak. Committee member Yu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In listening to public comment, we had speakers share that a new state license category for lounges could be burdensome. And though I understand that creating a new license type for lounges would be a consistent way to approach this issue, Member Babolian, would you be willing to amend the original recommendation to either allow for an on-site consumption addition to the retail license or provide, as several members have stated here, an exemption to current state regulations to allow local governments to decide?
Not really, and let me explain why. Nothing in this takes away any sort of local control. Over the past couple of years, as we all know, local control is embedded in the regulations. It's statutory in nature. The state can't provide anything or offer anything that the local doesn't want to provide. The reason why I'm suggesting and recommending that an additional category be set up for lounges specifically is because most cities don't even know that's an option. Right now, West Hollywood is a perfect example. West Hollywood created a lounge concept. They created licenses for it, and they're duly licensed. They're operational. Nothing prevents it. So what I'm recommending about creating an additional license category at the state level, A, does not take away any rights that the cities don't have already. Two, it doesn't supersede anything that the city doesn't want to do. There was a lot of conversation about West Hollywood and the restaurant model. Dual licensing already allows a local jurisdiction to develop their own business models and do what suits them. Arguing against the state creating a license category is more about protecting individual business interests than it is about what's in the best interest of the community, of the industry, and of the consumers. When we talk about consumption lounges, having that license at the state level, keep in mind a lot of these cities, when they're going through their licensing process, their ordinance development process, they're all looking to mirror what the state is allowing for. Having an additional license available for consumption lounges is no different than a retailer being separated from a delivery. If you're a dispensary, you're allowed delivery. But a lot of these cities, until the delivery license was made available expressly, they didn't even know it was an option. So what I'm recommending, not that it creates an additional license type or anything like this, but it does bring recognition to that license category, to that business model. So if a city was going to go through and look at what options are available to them, they would see that there is a lounge option available to them. The West Hollywood model that was created, the licenses that were created for consumption lounges, that was almost entirely driven by lobbying efforts. And most of those lobbying efforts were driven by the restaurateurs. That's why West Hollywood even ends up having that model. Most of these cities, they're not looking at it because no one's really pushing it forward. So that's why I wouldn't want to change the recommendation. I would still want to keep it the way it is, create an additional category. It doesn't create any other opportunity that's not already available. It doesn't take away any sort of local control, but it does bring specific attention to the lounge as a business model and as a category. And after this, I also have another recommendation. So those are my reasons why I wouldn't want to change it.
Thank you, Mr. Boboyan.
Sorry about that. Committee Member Todd, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks. So I also am going to vote against the motion. I don't think the crux of the issue here is about letting other cities know that they could do this as an option. I think we should be focused on making it work better for the local communities that have already adopted it and want it. So I would suggest not adopting this motion and instead doing something that's more focused on allowing consumption lounges that are allowed by local rule and that serve cannabis on site to serve non-cannabis infused food and beverages other than alcohol, also for consumption on site, consistent with local rules. And I think that allows follows the local control model, allows those communities to develop what works for the community, and then allows other communities to see what's working or not and decide for themselves whether to adopt it. And I think I want to just take a little bit of issue with this, sort of some of the public health statements I think that were made in public comment. First of all, I don't think alcohol is probably a great model to look to in terms of public health and on-site consumption, and I don't think we have to look to that, and I don't think it needs to look like that. But I think the idea that that it's better for public health to require that people consume cannabis alone at home, or if they can't at home, that they consume it in a public place, or that it's better that they consume it home alone, or if it's going to be in public without food or any other beverages, isn't a healthy model to develop and isn't a way to encourage probably the most healthy behavior around cannabis consumption when people could be consuming it in a social setting where there's other humans there and where they have other food and beverage. So I don't think we want to sort of adopt policy that drives people into isolation or requires consumption without food. I think obviously, it's a different substance, but I wouldn't want the creation of places where you go to just consume alcohol and you're not allowed to also have food. That seems like a bad model. And so I think that there's a path forward here that is a narrow encouragement to adapt the rules, for the agency to adapt the rules within the local framework working with localities that already want to allow to develop a slightly better model of on-site consumption for people within the communities that already have it. So I'm going to vote no on this motion, but I think that we should then take up a subsequent recommendation that's focused on improving the model for communities that have already looked to adopt it.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd. Vice Chair Heidelback, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. I just wanted to support what Member Boboyan had brought up. I think that, a lot of us talk about market access and ways that people can, obtain cannabis. And I think this is another great avenue. I think that it does preserve local control, because they obviously, with the dual licensing, they still get to decide whether or not they want to entertain that. I do think that, bars can be a public health issue, and that is also managed by people who have to figure out a way to get home safely, whether that's, calling Uber, Lyft, taxi, or a friend taking them home. And I just think that consumption lounges can, it really provides another opportunity to educate consumers who might be afraid of the product. And someone brought up the idea of microdosing. So I think really, the idea here is, being able to really build the base of consumers and giving folks another avenue to obtain cannabis. That is all.
Thank you, Vice Chair Heidelbach. Committee Member Lynch, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just want to speak to the comments just made. And we already allow consumption lounges, right? It's done on the local level. And in response to Baboulian's comments about the rationale for the statewide license, I just think it's not necessarily good policy from a public policy standpoint that we would, require licenses for purposes of, educating cities. I think there's a lot of work that the Bureau can do to provide that education. But, requiring licenses for that seems, unnecessarily burdensome.
Thank you, Committee Member Lynch. Committee Member Baboulian, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, to expand on the reasons why I'm recommending for an additional license type to be created at the state level is because in my work, I go and I deal with a lot of different jurisdictions, helping them understand cannabis, the business side of it, the regulatory side of it. The reason why a lot of the cities are pushing back with even allowing for lounges to be a business type in their city is because they don't have enough guidance from the state. And that's the number one pushback whenever the conversation about lounges comes up. It's like, well, there's no state license for it. There are no guidelines for it at the state level. So we're just going to take a wait and see whenever the state comes out with something, then we'll adopt it. So that's why I'm making this recommendation for the state to create that additional category, even though it's still available in the existing regulations. The jurisdictions don't know enough about it. And to not do something at the state level just to keep the locals in the dark, it's not expanding the industry. If we're looking at creating a robust industry, a robust supply chain, and a robust business model with different business opportunities, we need to take these additional steps. And when we're consolidating the regulations, there's no better time than to do it now. Keep in mind, all this stuff that we're talking about, it's not going to get adopted until next year anyway. So it's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. It's because of my personal experience dealing with all the different cities and helping them understand the businesses and helping them understand what opportunities they have available to them. So unless there's guidelines from the state specifically to what's allowed in the lounge, most of these cities are not going to adopt it.
Thank you, Committee Member Baboulian. Committee Member Neville, I saw that your hand was raised and then you lowered it. If you're still wishing to make a comment, please unmute yourself. Committee Member Neville. Okay. Committee Member Lynch, I see that your hand is still raised. Do you want to provide an additional comment? Right. Chair, I do not see any additional hands raised.
So we've had some good discussion, but looks like it's time to call the questions. So why don't we take the roll?
So the motion is to recommend that the Bureau create a license category for commercial cannabis consumption lounges. Baboulian.
Aye.
Cermak.
Nay.
Clifford.
No.
Farrow.
Both sides marketing issue. Excuse me, I'm going to abstain. I think that there's been really good comments made that there's guidance that allows local communities to make a decision. I think we have an obligation to try to get some marketing out there so that way best practices are highlighted. So abstain.
Heidelbach.
Yes.
Parada.
Nay.
Lynch.
No.
Nevdahl.
No.
Yes. Stevenson? Committee Member Stevenson? Todd?
Nay.
Woolsey?
No.
Wu?
Abstain.
You?
No.
Motion fails.
Well, that concludes item A of topic 4, unless we have another motion. But before we entertain maybe a potential other motion, I'm going to suggest we take a lunch break for 30 minutes, coming back at 1:07. Moderator, could you put up the recess? We will be on recess till 1:07.
Yes, will do. Before we completely break, I do want to make an announcement that members of the public, William Perno and Eric Sklar, if you guys could please do me a favor and lower your hands. And we are set and will return at 1:07.
Hey, Kayla, can you call the roll to make sure that our members have returned?
Baboyan?
Here.
Thank you. Cermak?
Here.
Thank you. Clifford?
I'm here.
Thank you. Farrow?
Here.
Thank you. Heidelback?
Here.
Thank you. Harada?
Here.
Thank you. Lynch?
Here.
Thank you. Nevdal?
Here.
Peck? Committee Member Peck, are you here? Committee Member Stevenson?
Here.
Thank you. Committee Member Todd?
Here.
Thank you. Committee Member Woolsey? Committee Member Wu?
Here.
Thank you. Committee Member Yu? Thank you. Quorum is established.
Fantastic. When we broke off for lunch, we had just had a vote on agenda item 4A, which we failed to get a majority in support of a motion. Are there any other motions that wish to be made or statements that might want to be made so that way the various agencies can consider the issues raised during the conversation? Again, like I said, I think I was really impressed with a couple of the public commenters that talked about how they were doing it already and were doing it with permission with their local city and having success. And I have heard from other folks about their concerns about the industry biting off more than they can chew, at least with the other challenges that the industry currently has. So any comments from our committee members, or can we move on? The show of hands, anybody have anything to raise?
I'm raising my hand. This is Committee Member Todd.
Okay, I'm looking because Committee Member Todd, please.
Yeah. I move that the committee recommend that BCC regulations be amended to allow consumption lounges that serve cannabis on site to serve non-cannabis infused food and non-alcoholic beverages for consumption on site if allowed by local rules.
Second.
Committee Member Todd, I'm going to have to ask that you repeat that one more time and go slow so that we can make sure we have it on the record.
Okay. So I move that the committee recommend that BCC regulations be amended to allow consumption lounges that serve cannabis on site to serve non-cannabis infused food and non-alcoholic beverages for consumption on site if allowed by local rules.
You have that, Caleb? Do I have a second?
Yes, second by Beverly.
Thank you, Beverly. Discussion.
So this is Todd. I think I spoke to it before, but the idea is to do something more narrow just for localities that already are permitting consumption lounges for on-site consumption of cannabis, to give them the allowance if the locality wants it to also have the on-site consumption of non-cannabis infused food and non-cannabis and non-alcoholic beverages.
Any other committee member wish to make a comment? And if not, we can go to public comment. Oh, Committee Member Babulian.
Thank you. My comment or question is, if consumption lounges are now recognized as its own category, isn't it safer to say it's just allow the retailers to sell non-cannabis products?
Thank you, Committee Member Babulian. Committee Member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. Moderator, can I ask that Committee Member Cermak be unmuted?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm just curious as to whether or not there's any limitation on size, or if this permits full-blown restaurants to be operated as part of a dispensary.
Committee Member Todd?
Yeah, well, I guess it would depend on, so it's for a consumption lounge as permitted under the local rules. So I think that's a different category, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, than a dispensary, but a local permit, a locality that permits a consumption lounge that is already permitted to serve cannabis on site, that it would allow if the locality also wants to allow under that local permit an allowance to also serve food. So I guess the question is, it sort of kicks it to the locality in terms of what the locality is allowing under their consumption lounge permit.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd. Committee Member Cermak, did you have any additional comments?
Oh. No, thank you. I forgot to put my hand down.
Perfectly fine. Committee Member Babulian, I see that your hand is raised. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Again, to expand on my comment, the local jurisdictions currently allow it. Okay, so with licensing, your local approval has to match your state approval. The way the local jurisdictions are allowing it now, they're allowing it as a use, and then at the state level, it's really your retail license that kicks in, and that's the license that you would apply for to be able to allow for that business model. So again, without recognizing consumption lounges as its own business, as its own category of license, it goes back to my same question. The local jurisdictions currently that are allowing it, they're allowing it, but at the state level, it's a retail license that kicks in. So wouldn't it just be safer to say allow for the retailer just to be able to sell non-cannabis related products? Because that's the license at the state level that the local applicant, local licensee would apply for anyway.
Well, I guess, and someone maybe who's more knowledgeable can correct me about the types of licenses. To me, that's a different thing, because this is focused on whether under the license type there's consumption on site, and then you're going to say there can be other food and beverages on site, whereas just allowing any retailer to sell other retail products unrelated to consumption on site or not to take away just seems like a different issue to me. That's not related to whether if you're legally now allowed under the license to consume cannabis on site, you can also consume other food.
This is Avis again. Again, this is why I had the last recommendation to allow for a consumption license to be created separately at the state level from retailer. And it would be specifically to address stuff like this. Because right now, whatever this goes for, at the local level, whatever is allowed at the state level, you would have to get the corresponding license for it. So right now, as it stands right now with different license categories available, if you're a consumption lounge at the local level, at the state level, you're applying for a retail license that allows for on-site consumption. So my question would be, how do you work that into the retail regulations, the retail portion of the regulations, to create that differentiator without setting up its own separate category that would oversee and have guidelines specific for that category?
Thank you, Committee Member Baboulian. Committee Member Nevdal, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Committee Member Nevdal here. So I think we're just maybe have a little bit of nomenclature hang up. I do really appreciate the intent of Committee Member Todd's recommendation. And it seems to me that the kind of the crux of what she's getting at here is that retailers that are allowed for consumption should have the option to also provide non-alcoholic beverages and food, as opposed to allowing retailers the option of providing non-alcoholic beverage and food. And so I think if I'm understanding Member Todd's intent or the intent of this motion, maybe just a friendly amendment so we aren't hung up on potentially defining a new type of license and or activity that we're trying to fit into a license type. I do want to just express that in general, I am not favorable to adding new license types. In most cases, I feel like we've already created a system here in California where the license types are so narrowly and rigorously defined that they very much so inhibit business activities in a sensible manner without having to then stack licenses and then separate premises. And then you just start down this rabbit hole. Maybe Member Todd, I apologize. I can put you on the spot a little bit.
So I actually struggled with what the right term was there, so I'm going to try and amend it. Sorry, finish. Go ahead.
No, I would love to hand the floor over to you.
Okay. Well, I would like to offer, I guess, an amendment to my own motion. I hesitated to do this before I've tried it out, but to say, I move that the committee recommend that BCC regulations be amended to allow a licensee that is permitted to serve cannabis on site to serve non-cannabis infused food and non-alcoholic beverage for consumption on site if allowed by local rules.
Committee Member Todd, you already know what I'm going to ask you. Can you please read?
Okay, yeah. Okay, and before someone seconds, someone else correct me if I'm wrong about the terminology. So I move that the committee recommend that BCC regulations be amended to allow a licensee that is permitted to serve cannabis on site to serve non-cannabis infused food and non-alcoholic beverages for consumption on site if allowed by local rules.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd.
Yeah. So do we have a second for the self-amended motion?
I believe it was.
Member Lynch seconds.
Oh, okay. Committee member Yu was the.
Yeah, and I do believe since committee member Yu made the first second, are you willing to accept the amendment?
Yes, happy to withdraw my second for this new amended motion.
Okay. Very
Second
good.
this new amended motion. Thanks.
So is there any other comment? I have committee member Baboulian's hand, Nevedal's hand, and Todd's hand still remaining. Committee member Baboulian, do you have a further comment, or has the clarifications that were made, do they make more sense now?
Thank you, Justice Davis. Two comments. My first comment is I'm all for this. I'm all for expanding the opportunities provided to licensees. And my second comment is why would, and this isn't questioning it, by the way, but it's why would we allow for consumption lounges to be able to, for instance, sell a bottle of water as long as it gets consumed on site, but the dispensary can't sell a bottle of water to a customer that's going to be buying and taking it with them. So again, that's where I'm saying that this is just chopping it up way too much. If we're going to allow for the consumption lounges, which again at the state level is a retail license, then the dispensary should also be afforded the opportunity to sell non-cannabis products and goods.
I'm going to ask council to provide a little clarity for us on at least the way that they look at the difference between a traditional retail dispensary and those retail sites that allow for consumption on site. So.
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre, counsel for the Bureau. I think that the committee should refer to section 26-200 of the Business and Professions Code, subsection G. Basically allows a local jurisdiction to allow for cannabis consumption on the premises of a retailer or micro business license under MAUCURSA if certain conditions are met. That subsection identifies a number of conditions, including access to the area where the cannabis consumption is allowed, being restricted to persons 21 years of age or older, cannabis consumption not being visible from any public place or non-age restricted area, and sale or consumption of alcohol or tobacco is prohibited on the premises.
Are there any other committee members that wish to make a comment? Please raise your hand if so. Vice Chair Haverback, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, because if we're voting on this, I want to understand the difference between Member Baboulian's motion and Member Todd's motion. So the difference being one was a new license type and this one is allowing operators who already have on-site consumption to also serve food. Is that correct? I want to make sure I understand what we're doing here.
I mean, I can answer for myself. What I see the difference is that, yes, I think the previous motion was about requiring a new license type at the state level, which I viewed as would be requiring entities that now have an allowance for on-site consumption of cannabis would have to go to the state and get this new category of state license. And this recommendation is about within the existing framework that's set up, that was just referenced, that allows some licenses with local permission and meeting certain state requirements to allow for the on-site consumption of cannabis. It would be to allow those licenses that already have an allowance under local control and in compliance with the Bureau's rules to do that, to also allow for on-site consumption of food and beverages.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd. Committee Member Baboulian, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
And thank you. And on my part, the difference that I see in this is not that we're creating a license type that doesn't already exist. We're just giving recognition to the nuances needed for that business model, which is the lounge. It's got a lot of different considerations that need to be taken into consideration. And there are existing license holders that would have a conflict later on. That's one of the easiest way to resolve that. Right now, it's really West Hollywood. There aren't too many jurisdictions that even created a lounge opportunity, a restaurant opportunity. This motion doesn't change anything that's not already in place. The people in West Hollywood, they do have that. They are selling infused products. They are selling food and other items that are not infused, including drinks that are non-alcoholic. So this doesn't really go far. It doesn't really do much. So, and I understand that all the different license types are burdensome. They are cumbersome. But this is one category that really is its own business model that's separate from being strictly a dispensary. The regulations on the retail already exist. All that stuff is still allowed the way it is right now. What I'm saying is the additional license type would give it recognition as a new business opportunity. As far as grandfathering in people that already have lounges set up, that's the easy part in all this.
This is Chair Farrow. Do you think it would be, I'm going to ask for a possible other friendly amendment, because it sounds like we all want the same kind of thing. That just the question is, do we need a new license type, or do we need to make it clearer for municipalities to make the decision to do it? So can you add to your motion and the second agree to it that we recommend that the agency make it clear or on its website for municipalities to see that this is permissive. Lounges are permissive, provided they follow the rules under local control. And then that way,
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, it's not that I have a strong objection to it, but I really don't think that our issue is that localities don't know that they're allowed to do this. I mean, they do. I mean, I'm all for communication, especially to license holders and individuals. But I haven't heard anything, or I didn't hear anything in the public comment or sort of evidence that's come to us, maybe otherwise, that localities are unaware that they can permit on-site consumption, and that's why they haven't allowed it. I think it is a narrow issue, which that addresses only certain jurisdictions that have moved forward. I think it's a good opportunity to allow those jurisdictions to explore the model as they want by allowing for the food and beverages. And I think through that, other jurisdictions can wait and see what they think it looks like and decide whether they want to adopt it or not. So I'd rather just keep the amendment very straightforward and not make it about notice to other localities, because I haven't really seen other localities show up and say, we would do this if we knew that we were allowed to. My feeling is that it's fairly clear.
Committee Member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, I'm just, Committee Member Cermak, I'm just curious whether or not this permission of food would be only for those local jurisdictions that have also permitted on-site consumption. And I would wonder why that, if a dispensary was not choosing to do on-site consumption, why they wouldn't be allowed, why they would be prohibited from serving food. So that's the first question. Is this only for those places that have on-site consumption? And the second question is, are localities specifically required to make two decisions? Yes, we'll have on-site consumption, and yes, we'll have food consumption. Or if they allow on-site consumption of cannabis products, does that automatically mean that they would be allowing food? So those things aren't clarified enough for me yet to understand.
Okay, so can I just give my answer based on what my intent of the motion is? And then, but if I'm wrong, definitely someone from the BCC or someone else can correct me. So on the first question, my understanding is that to be allowed to serve for a licensee to serve on-site consumption, that has to be permitted by the local jurisdiction. So yes, it would. This rule only applies to licensees that are permitted to serve on-site, and that has to be allowed by the local rule. So it would only apply to local jurisdictions that have allowed that. And then I do think under the local ordinance, how they've devised that their on-site consumption permit, they would have to allow this too, because that's why at the end I put for alcoholic beverages and food for consumption on-site if allowed by local rules. So I think, yes, it would be limited to jurisdictions that allow licensees to do on-site cannabis consumption, and then the local rules would have to also allow for the on-site food or beverages. So it could be devised by the local rule. To me, it's the reason why to limit is because I think there's an interest and a reason, if you're going to have on-site consumption of cannabis, to also be allowing for on-site consumption of food, right? For the experience when people are there, it's social in nature. I think it's a good idea to people be able to have food while they're consuming cannabis and other beverages. To me, it's a separate policy question whether we should allow dispensaries to just sell other products, food or other things, whether the business model should be expanded, or other businesses that primarily sell, body products or other food should be allowed to sell cannabis. And that's maybe a question we should address separately and vote on separately. But the reason why in this motion of it limited, well, one, it was the question that was agendized, I think, as it relates to on-site cannabis consumption. But I think that there's a separate policy interest in allowing where we're allowing on-site cannabis consumption to also allow the on-site consumption of food and beverages. That is a different policy question than just whether a store or a retail store can sell cannabis to go, or a cannabis dispensary should be able to just sell other products as part of their business model. So I just think we should vote on that separately. I think they're different policy issues.
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre from the Bureau. I just wanted to clarify that whatever standard that is recommended, local jurisdictions would still have the opportunity to be more restrictive with their requirements at the local level.
Committee Member Nevdal, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. This is Committee Member Nevdal, and I'm looking back on the materials provided for this conversation. Current law does, according to the materials, Title 16, Section 5407, prohibit the sale of non-cannabis food and beverages by a licensee. So arguably, I would assume that if a licensee is licensed to also allow for consumption, current law does not allow that licensee to also sell non-cannabis food and beverages. And I think that's why the motion is important, is because peeling that back away so that these models can move forward without being in conflict with state regulations.
Thank you, Committee Member Nevdal. Committee Member Boyan, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. A couple of things to take into consideration, kind of how I initially said that the license simply authorizes an activity. By moving forward with this motion, we have to look at the secondhand consequences and some of the other implications. We're looking at it as a cannabis-infused lounge or restaurant, kind of like West Hollywood. They're already allowed to do this. The local jurisdictions have full control over what they allow, what they don't allow, what they restrict, down to almost every single line item of regulations. But here's the flip side of this. What prevents a Mastro's that's already a restaurant, that's already a successful restaurant, from going out, getting this consumption, getting a license that allows for, in what we're talking about, non-cannabis products? They already have the non-cannabis products. They're already a full-blown restaurant. They can open up a smoking section that allows for cannabis consumption on site for anyone over 21. So now that becomes your competition. And these are some of the implications of regulations like this, where, again, as a whole, it doesn't change anything that's not already allowed. But what it does do is it expands opportunities for non-cannabis businesses to participate in cannabis activities that the actual consumer cares about. Keep in mind, the average patron would rather go to a Mastro's that's an established restaurant that has a smoking section for cannabis versus going to a cannabis specific infused restaurant where they're a lot more limited in their options, which is again going back to why I recommend separating it out and creating an additional category for it. Call it a lounge or just tack it onto the retail, call it retail / consumption. It's no different than delivery. But unless we give specific recognition to this category as a standalone business model and business opportunities, we're going to run into a lot of issues that can be exploited by other people, even though our intent and our interest is to expand the industry. And again, I'll go back to my initial comment. I'm all for expanding opportunities in the industry. I think the licensees should have as much opportunity to be as successful as they can. But some of these regulations, some of these line items are going to have unintended consequences.
Thank you, Committee Member Boboyan. Committee Member Nebdal, I see that your hand is still raised. Did you want to make an additional comment?
Yeah, this is Committee Member Nevadal. I'm actually really confused by Member Boboyan's comments because I don't see how a Morton's or a restaurant that already exists would be able to just go out and easily start offering cannabis. I mean, they would be subject to the same local permitting process as any other retailer that chooses to allow consumption on site because the local permit allows that. And then they would have to also get a state license for retail. And what we've seen in the state is that there's still a lot of municipalities that have very restrictive programs around allowing retail with consumption. So I don't see where this motion in any way, shape, or form creates an expedited or abusive pathway for other non-permitted and licensed entities to suddenly have access that they don't currently already have. Morton's could open up a section of the restaurant closed off in a separate premise for a retail and consumption area. Currently, they just could not serve food within that area or beverage. So I'm sorry, I don't see how this would create this flood of consumption type settings in traditional restaurant or cafe settings. Thank you.
I'd love to expand on that. Let me explain. Through the licensing process, especially when you're dealing with a merit-based competitive application process for a limited number of licenses, it's all about establishing why you should get that privileged license versus the other group. When you're at the local level, and again, going back to what you just said, at the state level, it all comes down to local competition for that license. It's a privileged license that you're applying for. Look at West Hollywood. How many applicants did you have? How many license winners did you end up with? And the license winners were better able to demonstrate that they would be more successful with that license. They had a better business model. So now when you put on your applicant hat and you're going in any one of these jurisdictions that's allowing for it, the local jurisdiction, who are they going to have more confidence in as a license holder or as an applicant? The brand new guy that's coming out saying, I want to set up a cannabis infused restaurant, or the established restaurant that's been in that community for all those years, that's already contributing tax dollars, that already has all those jobs created, that's now simply allowing for cannabis to be consumed on site. For the city, when they're making their decision, as it is, 70-80% of these cities are now allowing for cannabis within their local jurisdiction. The ones that are kind of being forced into it, whether it's job creation or tax revenues that they desperately need, they're going to try to do it in as limited of a way as they possibly can. And one of the best ways you limit it is to allow it as an extension of an existing traditional business, as opposed to a brand new standalone cannabis business. And that's where I'm going at. So if I'm doing the application for a client, I've got two clients. One of them is a brand new concept that's going to be specifically cannabis, that's leading with cannabis. And I have somebody that's already an established business within that community. They have roots in that community. I guarantee you that guy's going to have more of a leg up than the brand new applicant is. So all this stuff that we're talking about, it's not a competition at the state level, it's a competition at the local level, which is directly going to impact the licensees. If you want an example, look at West Hollywood. Look at the profile of all the license winners in West Hollywood and compare them to all the people that didn't get their license. They all came from traditional business experience with deep roots in West Hollywood. So now ask yourself, who would you rather compete against when you're submitting your local application?
Thank you, Committee Member Boboyan. Committee Member Peck, I see that your hand is raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Committee Member Peck, I think we've belabored this topic. My question always comes back to who's going to enforce this and who's going to pay for this. And so I think that when we add more regulations and more things that we're adding, I mean, the idea of a dispensary is go in, buy your stuff, and leave. So, I mean, if we're going to get into this, I think we're creating a pyramid of issues that we're going to be spending hours trying to decide what is best for each individual community. So my last comment is rules and regulations are great, but who's going to enforce them?
Thank you, Committee Member Peck. Committee Member Todd, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly confirm agree with Committee Member Nevedal and also confirm with what she said that she believed the intent of the motion was based on the packet of materials we got, that it's to address this narrow circumstance where the existing rules are working against what some localities want in the context of allowing for their on-site consumption permits. And I think it will apply narrowly in that context and does not open the door to lots of doomsday scenarios.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd. Committee Member Nevedal, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I also want to just, this is Committee Member Neville, I want to remind folks that statute does prohibit alcohol on the same premise as cannabis. So in the case of these restaurants that are already well established and ingrained within the communities, a lot of them have some sort of alcohol license. They would either have to create a whole new separate premise and or relinquish that alcohol license to participate in what's being proposed here. I just don't see I don't see the doomsday scenario either, with all respect. So and I being in Humboldt, I hope a lot of our locals are the ones that get licenses, and it's part of our community. It keeps those dollars local. So I think we have debated this plenty, so I'm gonna yield the floor and I won't raise my hand again.
Well, don't feel that way, but I am going to take a break because we have one of the committee members who found himself on the opposite side of being able to make comments. So we're going to need to do a little bit of technical work to get committee member Woolsey back in, because I think he's been patiently with his hand up for quite some time. So we'll take a couple minutes break and then we'll allow committee member Woolsey to make some comments, and then we'll probably move it to public comment. Thank you.
This is David Woolsey testing the mic.
You are good.
Thank you.
So committee member Woolsey, thank you for your patience. Would you like to make some comments?
Sure, thank you. And just for the record, I have been listening since the motion was made. So I've been a part of the quorum or whatever since we returned from the break. While I do have concerns about non-cannabis food items being sold at cannabis licensees in general, my concerns about this particular motion are that if we're going to go there, it discriminates against other retailers who are in locations that might not allow social consumption, but would otherwise allow them to sell candy, M&Ms, prepackaged chips, Lunchables, I don't know, prepackaged sandwiches. It doesn't allow them to do the same kind of activity just because they're not consuming, unless the intent of allowing a consumption lounge retailer to sell non-cannabis food items also mandates that those food items be consumed on site and not taken away. Then you're not discriminating against the other retailer. You're saying, hey, if you want to buy it here, you have to eat it here. But if you're allowing them to buy a bottle of water, buy a soda, buy a bag of chips at a consumption lounge and take it away, that should also apply to regular retailers. I'm not suggesting that we actually do that. I'm not a proponent for that. But if we're going to suggest a recommendation to the licensing authorities, that recommendation should at least be fair across everybody within that license type, or create a different license type for that specialized activity, which I'm also against. And then when you talk about food items, is that all food? prepackaged, pre-cooked food from another manufacturer, from the licensee, raw food, fruits, vegetables, salads, where are the food handling requirements and who's inspecting those. In my jurisdiction, our county has been a long supporter of not helping the cannabis industry, and we as a city don't have our own public health, so we rely on the county's public health. So now we're in a position where I'm not qualified to go do a public health inspection on a kitchen because I don't have the training and the experience. But it's also might be just difficult for me to get my county to go do that because they don't deal with anything that has to do with cannabis. So it creates conflicts all up and down the state if we make this a statewide recommendation. So those are my thoughts in particular on this particular motion. Is really it discriminates against those retailers who want to, just sell M&Ms, candy bars, prepackaged stuff, in addition to their regular thing. Maybe not fresh foods, but stuff that can be taken away and consumed. And I don't see that it's fair that we would allow a consumption place to do that, but not a regular retailer, unless you mandate the consumption place that any food sold has to be consumed on site. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Woolsey. Committee Member Peck, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. Committee Member Todd, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted a quick clarification that the motion does restrict it for food that's consumed on site. So it says to allow to serve non-cannabis infused food and beverages for consumption on site.
Thank you, Committee Member Todd. Committee Member Woolsey,
Thank you.
I see that your hand is raised.
Yeah, I was just going to thank Committee Member Todd and then lower my hand.
Perfect. Committee Member Yu, I saw that your hand was raised and then lowered. If you'd like to make a comment, please unmute yourself. Committee Member Yu.
Just want to clarify here. The Bureau has jurisdiction over allowing for the sale of non-cannabis food and beverages, correct?
Hi, this is Angela from the Bureau. As stated on the question for the advisory committee, the Bureau is asking whether we should allow retailers to sell non-cannabis food items. If that is a position that the committee wants to recommend, any food or beverages would need to comply with all applicable rules related to the sale, preparation, and service of such items.
Thank you.
Committee Member Peck, I saw that your hand was raised and lowered, so I'm going to assume that that meant that you did not have any additional comments. If committee members have any other comments they would like to make, please raise your hand. Chair, I am seeing no additional hands raised.
Excuse me, I'm having trouble finding my hand. This is Committee Member Cermak. It just strikes me that this is just both good and bad for the industry. I can understand the good of being able to give dispensaries an additional source of income plus an additional source of serving their customers. But as soon as the dispensaries begin co-opting some of the business of places like bookstores that have cafes or other places that serve food, those businesses will automatically begin finding ways to intrude on the dispensaries. And they're better funded by and large to be able to do that. So I think the way in which it opens up to unintentional consequences is pretty unknown, but pretty certain to happen.
Thank you, Committee Member Cermak. Chair, I see no additional hands raised at this point.
Moderator, could you open up for public comment for the motion that we have before us?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom portion of your screen and submit you would like to make a public comment. We will take all comments in the order they are received. We have an individual identified as Lynn Silver. In just a moment, I will unmute your mic. As a reminder, we are taking one comment per individual. You will be given 1.5 minutes to make your public comment and provided a 20-second warning. With that, Lynn, your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. Lynn Silver, Public Health Institute. As was noted, BCC regs do not currently allow the sale of foods at retailers. It says, in addition to cannabis goods, a licensed retailer may only sell cannabis accessories and branded merchandise. That is one of the things that BCC got right. Neither do most other state laws. That's with or without local approval for on-site consumption. We should enforce this, not change it. In our recent analysis of all local laws in California, published in JAMA, we found that 63% of California jurisdictions still do not allow legal adult use sales. If you make the requirement for retailers even laxer and create cannabis restaurants and food stores, you will see even less support for legalization. Furthermore, the idea that you will be missing an opportunity to compete against other restaurants does not make sense. Smoking or vaping in the workplaces, such as bars or restaurants, is not currently allowed in California, with the exception of authorized on-site cannabis retailers and certain cigar environments. As I said earlier, we should be allowing safe legal access, not creating new environments that promote addiction. It would be like going back in time and reopening smoke-filled bars with food service and restaurants again. It is a historically bad idea that fails to learn from everything we know from alcohol and tobacco and their impact on our young people. It could be renamed the In Memory of the Good Old Tobacco Days motion. We strongly oppose. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Jackie Subek. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, I just want to say I'm in full support of Committee Member Todd's motion on the table. First off, we're not talking about the ability to sell infused foods, as Committee Member Bulbullion continues to make reference to. This motion is specific to non-infused food and beverage. Lounges must have the ability to sell these items first and foremost in the interest of public safety. We do not want our customers to consume cannabis and not have any food or beverage to offset that. Secondly, I agree with Committee Members Todd and Nevedal, who have expressed that this motion should be narrowly defined to open the regulations for licensees that are permitted or licensed for on-site consumption. Thirdly, I disagree with Committee Member Woolsey's comments regarding the right to take away leftover non-infused food items and his idea of mandating that all non-infused food items be consumed on-site. Once a licensee has received a food safety permit from the Department of Public Health, customers should be able to take away leftover food items exactly as any other restaurant in the state. And finally, Committee Member Cermak's comments about restaurants and bookstores potentially receiving the right to have consumption is far-fetched. They would have to go through the exact same application process with their local jurisdiction as every other potential licensee wants to do. So this motion must give the local jurisdictions flexibility to make the best decisions for their communities, not continue to have it restricted. So I ask that this committee take up this motion, vote yes on this motion to at least, if nothing else, give food and beverage rights to the consumption lounges. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I'm against this additional license type. And a question that hasn't been asked is, why does the BCC currently prohibit sales of food and beverages that are not cannabis? We have to keep in mind that we have alcohol establishments, restaurants that morph into nightclubs. And is music and live music going to be allowed at cannabis consumption lounges? Are they going to morph into nightclubs? We have alcohol licensees that don't have restaurants or kitchens and don't serve food. You can have a food truck or a separate business like is already being done. And it's really important to note that cannabis can be infused into any food product. How will regulators know what is infused or not infused with cannabis during inspections of cannabis consumption lounges if they're selling other products? And I agree with Lynn Silver in saying that we have a lot of things, lessons learned from tobacco control and we are taking steps backwards by when we're opening this up like we are. Let local jurisdictions decide this. And someone on the panel, please ask the BCC, why does the BCC currently prohibit sales of food and beverages? And how are they going to regulate and identify what's infused and what's not infused when these retailers or consumption
20
lounges,
seconds.
when the retailers or consumption lounges have all kinds of products there, what has cannabis in it and what doesn't? When it's out of the packaging and for sale, how is anyone going to be able to tell? And the possibility there for selling products that aren't identified or are not taxed is huge. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Max Michelanis. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. Max Michelanis on behalf of Flow Cannabis Co. Flow Cannabis Co. Supports the allowance for sale of non-cannabis food and beverages by licensed retailers. Whether if they have the consumption license or the local authorization to consume as considered by this motion, or if they're beyond that, just allowing that sale of non-cannabis goods. To address a couple of the other comments that have been made, we're in a situation where the prohibition on sale of food and beverages is not limited just to cannabis. It's a prohibition on sale of all non-cannabis goods, so it's not limited just a ban there. Additionally, what we're really asking for here is for the state to go and allow some beverages to be sold on site. Compared to the current status quo of Oregon, there's no prohibitions. There is a need for state regulatory action. There is no local control aspect until the state goes and allows for sale of food and beverages.
20 seconds.
That's all. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Rebecca Stamey White. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Great, thank you. Rebecca Stamey White, a cannabis and alcohol regulatory attorney. I wholeheartedly agree with committee member Bulbulian's take on the state of the industry and what is needed to make it successful, which includes rulemaking to permit additional retail licensing and to allow retailers to sell products other than cannabis. The current motion should be expanded to all retailers, not just lounges, which only represent a tiny fraction of businesses in the state. First, localities may be aware of on-site consumption options, but requiring them to develop their own licensing takes time, effort, and political will, which, much like our country's approach to COVID-19, puts too much burden on localities and puts the onus on lobbying to put pressure on them. The top-down state licensing approach is far more efficient and is what this committee should be supporting. I am extremely confused why this is not the way the discussion seems to be going. Second, all retailers should be able to sell products other than cannabis, much like grocery stores and restaurants can sell products other than alcohol. Committee members keep commenting on the overcomplexity of the cannabis licensing system,
20 seconds.
which is in fact not nearly as complex as the alcohol licensing system, which has over 80 different license types. But I digress. What is easiest, if that is the committee's true goal, is to let retailers of all types, regardless of local on-site consumption issues, to sell products other than cannabis. I see no public policy agenda that is reached by preventing them from selling non-cannabis goods or limiting it to just consumption lounges. This helps.
Time had been reached. Our next public comment comes from Deborah Goldsberry. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Debbie Goldsberry, CEO of Magnolia Wellness Dispensary in Oakland. We've had a license for on-site consumption since 2016 with no problems. Our local regulators issued the license, they regulate it, and they could easily regulate the food service aspect of this too. I support this motion and thank Committee Member Todd for listening carefully to the public comment and for understanding this hole in the regulations. She created the perfect motion to fit the moment. For general dispensaries, yes, the motion does not extend to everyone, so another motion could be put forth. But in this case, as a dispensary owner, I'd say there are a number of other items besides pre-packaged food and beverages that should be added to the list of items sold at dispensaries, like books, for example. Maybe we can put this on a future agenda and discuss the issue in full. This motion captures what's missing with the current regulations. and encapsulates what the consumers want. Before 2018, dispensaries were long-held meeting places where people came, they stayed for hours, they consumed cannabis, listened to lectures, shared information, joined together as a community. And that's in fact how we were able to legalize cannabis. Our core supporters were gathering together and working together to spread the word about the need to change the laws. We all miss those days. After all, that was the system for 20 years.
20 seconds.
I'm hopeful that the committee members will vote yes to this very important motion. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment is from Kershid Koha. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you very much. So wholeheartedly agree with everything that Debbie just said in relation to the motion by Committee Member Todd. It's a very well-crafted, well-tailored motion. Would support it wholeheartedly. I would say, though, that I agree with the other commenters who've said that retailers generally should be allowed to sell non-cannabis goods as well, not just consumption lounges. So I would agree that this is a good start. It's better than passing nothing. But I think it doesn't address the entire situation, which I think we should discuss as well. Thank you.
Our next public comment is from Jason Sharouche. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Members of the committee, my name is Jason Sarouche from the Getting It Right from the Start project at the Public Health Institute. Someone made a comment that it was a matter of public safety for food to be available for users to offset the effects of cannabis. I mentioned before, I'm a registered dietitian, and I just wanted to let everyone know cannabinoids are fat soluble and they're transported throughout the body in the same transport molecules as fats and fat soluble vitamins. They're known as chylomicrons, lipoproteins. So by consuming food when consuming cannabis, you actually increase the psychoactive effects. So just saying that, it's going to make people actually have more intoxication if they consume food with cannabis than if they didn't. Additionally, I would just like to stress that we do not want to create more environments where people are consuming cannabis outside of the home. As I mentioned before, drug driving is a major issue in our country. 10,511 people died in 2018 from alcohol-related car accidents. We need to learn from the mistakes we made that were made by regulatory agencies with alcohol regulations, not make the same mistakes with cannabis regulations. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, at this time, we have no additional requests. I take that back. We did just receive a new request for public comment from an individual identified as Ed Brown. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, thank you, committee. This is Ed Brown again from Original Equity Group. Again, I just want to make sure we keep a lens on the perspective of equity in the conversations that are held at the state level. As you guys know, there are state equity grants that are being distributed. I want to say that I strictly oppose this proposal. I think it blends the line between cannabis strictly retailers. I think it goes against what Prop 64 was set up to do, which is create a weed regulatory set of regulations. I also think this adds more to the bureaucratic process for licensees to have to go and create new rules around food consumption and food sales. I also adding the equity perspective, this is kind of presents an unfair business advantage. Potentially the unintended consequences, retailers having to do business with deli owners and liquor store owners who are, decimated by COVID and now see cannabis as an opportunity to be able to, stay in business. Again, that's not what this was set up for. That's not what this regulatory basis was for. And so I'm opposed to that. Also,
20 seconds.
If, you have property owners who also have ancillary businesses as well, who own some of these lounges, predominantly in San Francisco. And so you could have a system where your property owners can kind of get together to kind of be able to have a monopoly on some of these lounges, and also be able to get the consumer market base because they can share products that other.
time had been reached. Our next public comment comes from Marnie Berger. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, I want to say last comment, I said norml.com, but I meant .org. So I just wanted to make that clear for anyone that wants to look up a lot of data. But I agree also with what Debbie said. Otherwise, it's just suppression if this isn't allowed to happen. We need less suppression. And I just want to put it on the record that the gentleman that said that food increases psychoactive effects is not correct. He's just making that up. I hope that through education that people can see the healing side of cannabis and community, and that it's actually a culture. And when, yeah, if you can,
20 seconds.
Thank you for listening. That's all.
Our next public comment comes from Joanna Cedar. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you very much. I speak in favor of this amendment because we have to start somewhere in terms of normalizing retail and expanding the definitions of dispensary as much as we can. I agree with Debbie and Khurshid and everything that they said. And then I want to speak to a few commenters saying we don't want more people consuming cannabis. And in fact, we do want more people consuming cannabis. In states where adult use cannabis is legal, the opioid addiction rate has dropped by double digits. That is a major public health win, and that's with those states doing nothing. Could you imagine what we could do as a community if we actually piloted programs?
Hi, this is the moderator. Our co-moderator. I just want to make sure that we are keeping on track with comments relating to the motion that is being presented.
At this time, Mr. Chair, we have received no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please, and I'd like to call the roll on the motion.
So the motion, I'll restate for you, is that the BCC regulations be amended to allow a licensee that is permitted to serve non-cannabis infused food and non-alcoholic beverages for consumption on site if allowed by local rules. Boboyan.
I just wanted to clarify one thing to make sure it's correct. So it's to allow a licensee that's permitted to serve cannabis on site to also serve non-cannabis infused food and non-alcoholic beverages for consumption. I don't know if I heard it wrong, but I just wanted to clarify that I had it a little bit different.
So it is that the BCC regulations be amended to allow a licensee that is permitted to serve cannabis on site
Yeah.
serve non-cannabis infused food and non-alcoholic beverages for consumption on site if allowed by local rules, correct?
Perfect. Yes, thank you.
Boboyan,
Abstain.
Cermak, moderator, can we have committee member Cermak unmuted? Committee member Cermak, your vote?
I vote no.
Thank you.
Did you call me?
Sarah,
Aye.
Heidelback? Committee member Heidelback?
Aye.
Thank you. Harada,
Abstain.
Lynch,
Aye.
Nevdal?
Aye.
Peck?
No.
Todd?
Aye.
Williams?
No.
Woolsey? Committee Member Woolsey? I cannot hear you. Committee Member Wu?
Abstain.
I'm sorry, Committee Member Woolsey, what was your vote? Committee Member Yu? Committee Member Yu, I did not hear you.
Aye.
If there are people who didn't vote, could you go back through and check on them again one more time? Thank you.
Sure. Committee Member Clifford?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Yes, sorry, I had audio problems before. My intent was to vote aye.
And then Committee Member Woolsey?
This is the moderator, and if Committee Member Woolsey is connected via 2 devices and he attached them, he needs to make sure that whichever device he's using the audio from is also unmuted.
Committee Member Woolsey, are you able to unmute yourself to give a vote? Motion. I said the motion has passed.
I'd like to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll resume with agenda item number 4B or C, I believe. B? There, yes, it is. 4B on amount of cannabis goods that can be carried by delivery vehicles. So 5-minute recess, please.